Emily huddled in the corner of the bathroom stall. Her lunch lay untouched on her lap as she nervously reviewed her exam material. Outside the walls of the stall, classmates chatted about makeup and crushes. The bell rang and the schoolgirls poured out of the bathroom. Emily took a deep breath and stepped out of the stall. She washed her hands, all the while avoiding looking down at them. She knew her fingertips were a mess, raw and slightly bleeding. She stared straight ahead at the mirror, muttering reassurances to herself. "You can do this. You're going to pass this exam." The hallways were silent and deserted as Emily stopped at her classroom door. She looked through the window at the neat rows of desks. Sat behind each one was a student, exuding calmness, ready for the exam. It was so different from her own frazzled appearance. Her breath shook and her hand trembled as she pushed the door open, its creak echoing in the quiet hallway. As she entered the classroom, some students looked up and snickered, but Emily was focused. She needed to find her seat and pass this test. The classroom seemed to blur around her as she focused on the exam paper in front of her. Her anxiety hit a peak, and her fingers automatically moved to her mouth. As Emily attacked her exam questions and her fingertips with equal ferocity, whispers turned to gasps, then to screams. "She's a monster!" one student cried out. Emily, deeply absorbed, kept writing, unaware of the chaos brewing around her. Confronted with the final question of the exam, Emily bit down on her fingernail until a loud crunch filled the room. A few students fainted. One vomited. The rest were in too much shock to react. When the teacher came over to help, Emily, still lost in her exam, accidentally shoved her away. Blood was sent splattering across the floor and onto her paper. Emily's eyes moved from her stunned teacher to her own hands, her expression turning to horror. Still, her mind urged her on. Wipe the blood away, keep writing. She continued until paramedics arrived and pulled her from her desk. In the plain, clinical office of the psychiatrist, Emily sat with her injured finger tightly wrapped in gauze. Blood still seeped through, staining it red. The psychiatrist, a woman with a calm yet assertive manner, started to discuss everything that led to her being committed to this facility. Unaware, Emily began nibbling on her other hand. "Do you know what a coping mechanism is?" the psychiatrist asked in a gentle but firm tone. Emily, her eyes misting with tears, shook her head slightly, while her hand moved instinctively to her mouth. "It's something you do to reduce stress or discomfort," the psychiatrist explained, observing Emily closely. "But if it hurts you, it's considered maladaptive, like your nail biting." Emily stopped biting and clenched her hand into a fist in her lap, fighting the urge. "Do you remember the first time you started biting your nails?" the psychiatrist asked. Emily nodded, her mind drifting back to a dark memory she wished she could forget. "It was years ago," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I was just a little girl." She described the night it all started, her father drunk and aggressive, her mother coming home late to spark a violent argument. Sent to her room, Emily listened as the noise grew, yelling, something breaking, a loud thud. Curiosity drew her out, only to find her mother on the floor, her father standing over her, anger coursing through every sinew. That's when Emily started crying uncontrollably until she bit her tongue. The pain cut through her sobs. "That was when I learned that pain," Emily said, looking into the psychiatrist's eyes. "Pain could silence the fear, the anxiety. It made everything quiet." The psychiatrist wrote this down, her face reflecting deep consideration. "You've carried this way of coping into your adolescence," she noted. "Now we need to find healthier ways for you to manage your feelings." Emily watched the psychiatrist, her feelings a tangle of fear and hope. As her fingers slowly moved back toward her mouth, the psychiatrist handed her a small, bright ball. "Let's keep your hands busy," she suggested. Emily took the ball and squeezed it, shifting her focus to the pressure in her grasp rather than the pain. Later that day, in the recreation room, Emily couldn't help but feel like she'd accidentally stumbled into a preschool class, not a psychiatric facility. There she was, notably the eldest, towering over kids like a giant. Their little hands were fitted with bandages, a telltale sign that they all shared a fondness for compulsive habits. It should have made her fit right in. It didn't. Emily gripped the stress ball as she took a seat in one of the small chairs. She thought about playing checkers with the boy seated beside her, but decided against it. Instead, she started peeling away the gauze from her finger. The room went quiet. The children watched, their expressions a mix of curiosity and awe. The little boy next to her fidgeted, uneasy. "We're not supposed to do that," he murmured, his voice filled with a mix of fear and fascination. Emily gave a half smile, her face showing a blend of sadness and defiance. "Sometimes the rules are too hard to keep," she whispered, tossing him the stress ball. As Emily pulled off the final layer of bandages, revealing the raw, sensitive skin underneath, a noticeable shift occurred among the watching children. They looked at their own wrapped hands, and then back at Emily. Emily's small act of defiance seemed to linger heavily in the room. Within moments, all the children began unwrapping their bandages and feasting on their nails and fingertips. Recognizing Emily's potential to influence the other children, the staff decided to place her in solitary confinement. The room was stark, equipped only with a chair and a camera to record every moment under close surveillance. The psychiatrist glared at Emily, while the nurses tightly secured her limbs to the chair with leather straps to prevent self-harm. "You started a feeding frenzy," the psychiatrist sternly said, watching Emily's reaction closely. "You can't bite your nails in front of the kids." With that, she turned on her heel and slammed the door shut, leaving Emily alone. Only the closed-circuit television kept her company, the prying eyes beyond watching her, staring at her. Confined, Emily's anxiety soared to new heights. Every single movement caused the restraints to strain and dig into her skin, stark reminder of her confinement. Overwhelmed by a growing desperation, she gnawed at the leather straps with unexpected ferocity. Her teeth had become surprisingly sharp, her desperation transforming them into something wild and untamed. Maybe she was a monster. Would that be such a bad thing? Monsters are strong. Monsters aren't broken or afraid. Monsters are survivors. Once free of her shackles, Emily quickly removed the remaining gauze from her hands. Beneath the wraps, her fingers had undergone a shocking change. They were no longer topped with human nails, but had morphed into sharp, black, chitinous points. A wild giggle escaped her as she looked over her new claws. A wave of power washed over her, wiping away any remnants of the fragile, subdued girl she had once been. Turning to face the camera that had been watching her every move, her eyes glinted with a fierce, unsettling joy. She lunged at the lens, attacking it with her new claws. The camera vibrated violently as her last look, a chilling, victorious smirk, fizzed into static before the screen abruptly went black. She had become SCP-8480-A. SCP-8480, classified with a containment class of Keter, a disruption class of Eki, and a risk class of Critical, refers to an anomalous mental disorder affecting children aged 3 to 14, known as SCP-8480-1 instances. These children exhibit a range of symptoms from moderate to severe anxiety, headaches or migraines, intensive nail biting, onychophagia, skin-eating dermatophagia, unusually rapid healing, and a high tolerance for pain in their digits. The disorder typically activates under conditions of extreme, persistent anxiety or traumatic experiences, particularly if the child uses nail biting as a coping mechanism during such times. Following infection, the progression of symptoms in SCP-8480-1 instances varies depending on internal and external stress factors. A significant number of cases may persist into adulthood without clear symptoms. Currently, a substantial number of infected children, recorded in the thousands, are under the care of the Foundation, having been committed before reaching the age of 15. A notable subject, SCP-8480-A, or Emily Curtis, age 20, was significantly older than typical instances at the time of discovery. Stage 1 of SCP-8480 can initiate any time before adolescence, typically affecting children around the age of 9, although cases as young as 3 months have been noted. Diagnosing infants is challenging as they lack teeth. Early signs often exude sucking on fingers or gumming their limbs. Regardless of age, SCP-8480-1 instances exhibit initial symptoms within 2 to 3 days of the triggering event. During this stage, instances commonly experience low to moderate anxiety throughout most days. They may also suffer from mild physical discomforts, such as stomach aches or headaches, which are frequently dismissed as common childhood complaints. Moreover, these children develop various maladaptive coping strategies, including skin picking, hair pulling, and notably, nail biting, which they often describe as providing the most relief. A troubling psychological symptom is the onset of a deep-seated belief among the affected children that there is something fundamentally wrong with them, which cannot be corrected. It remains unclear whether this belief is a direct symptom of SCP-8480 or a psychological side effect of the disorder. Without intervention, children typically progress to Stage 2 within 6 months to a year from the appearance of the first symptoms. Stage 2, referred to as stasis, marks a deepening of the initial symptoms observed in SCP-8480-1 instances. In this stage, the afflicted children become heavily dependent on their maladaptive coping mechanisms to manage their emotional states. Despite attempts through medical, psychological, or therapeutic interventions, these behaviors persist unabated and intensify. During Stage 2, instances notably increase their reliance on nail biting and skin eating, which are used consistently to regulate their emotions. This escalation in behavior frequently results in physical injury, with instances often experiencing bleeding due to the severity of their actions. SCP-8480-1 instances are capable of remaining in this stage indefinitely. Notably, SCP-8480-A is the oldest recorded instance who had remained in Stage 2 until just before being admitted into Foundation care. Regression to Stage 3 occurs only after an SCP-8480-1 instance endures a significant and prolonged period of stress, anxiety, and traumatic experiences. The specific circumstances that catalyze this transition vary from individual to individual, making it challenging to predict exactly what will trigger the advancement to Stage 3. Stage 3, termed Complete Infection, marks a critical phase for SCP-8480-1 instances, where mitigation of symptoms and reduction of self-inflicted injuries become the primary focus, as further recovery is not feasible. In this stage, all previous symptoms escalate from moderate to severe, accompanied by several distinct and severe anomalous effects. The skin and muscles in the fingers and hands of affected individuals soften significantly, making them more susceptible to damage. Biting their fingers, nail beds, or hands triggers the production of nerve blockers and endorphins in the brain. This adaptation reduces pain and provides a brief sensation of pleasure, complicating the cessation of these behaviors. The hardening of the teeth enables instances to bite through not just flesh, but also bone, intensifying the severity of their condition. Anomalous cellular regeneration is heightened, leading to rapid tissue repair and forcing a cyclical pattern of self-consumption to manage emotional distress. Instances develop a compulsive need to consume the flesh and nails around their fingers, driven by their accelerated healing rates. Affected subjects experience a profound psychological impact, feeling fundamentally broken and no longer identifying as human. This manifests in a loss of interest in normal human activities, including eating anything other than their own body. Current research efforts are directed towards finding potential cures or methods to neutralize SCP-8480. However, no effective treatment has been discovered yet. Instances in Stage 3 will persist in this state until their biological functions cease, underscoring the dire nature of this advanced stage of SCP-8480. Stage 4, known as Reclamation, represents a profound transformation in SCP-8480-1 instances, believed to occur after a period of deep self-reflection and acceptance of the traumas that triggered their condition. This stage is only reached when an instance stops the constant self-consumption of their fingernails and surrounding tissues. The symptoms characteristic of Stage 4 include complete cessation of pain, although it remains unclear whether this lack of sensation is due to physiological changes or psychological factors. A significant reduction in anxiety levels, which drop to minor or negligible. The nature of this reduction, whether anomalous or not, is yet to be determined. While compulsive behaviors like nail biting and skin eating cease, subjects continue to exhibit other maladaptive coping mechanisms and signs of psychological distress. the development of black chitinous growths in place of fingernails, which are capable of cutting through metal, stone, and organic materials, marking a significant physical anomaly. Enhanced physical capabilities, including increased strength, endurance, and metabolism, which contribute to a heightened state of existence. Marked increase in hostility towards Foundation staff, coupled with a refusal to remain in containment, posing significant challenges to management and security. Due to these complexities and the substantial threat posed to normalcy, containment protocols for SCP-8480-1 instances in Stage 4 have been entirely revised. All previous treatment approaches have been suspended indefinitely, reflecting a shift in strategy in response to the unique challenges presented by this advanced stage. All SCP-8480-1 instances are mandated to be isolated and contained at Site 80-P, ostensibly under extended psychiatric care. Bandages, gauze, splints, and casts are provided only upon the instance's request. A critical part of the containment strategy involves placing any potential SCP-8480-1 instance in a controlled, traumatic scenario post-identification, without the awareness of the subject or their guardians. Should symptoms escalate after the induced trauma, the individual is immediately transferred to Foundation custody. Strictly, Foundation staff are prohibited from offering counseling, support, or any mental health treatments to SCP-8480-1 instances. Furthermore, these instances are not discouraged from engaging in maladaptive auto-cannibalism, as this behavior has shown to deter the progression to Stage 4. Consequently, SCP-8480-1 instances require minimal sustenance, only needing food and water once a month, and are kept in solitary confinement continuously. SCP-8480-A, identified for aggressive immediate measures, is to be neutralized upon detection, with remains to be sent back to Site 80-P for detailed analysis and further study.
A young man tosses and turns in bed. He adjusts his pillow and tries sleeping on his back, his side, his stomach, but nothing works. He rolls over to check the time. 3 a.m. This is the third night in a row he hasn't been able to fall asleep. He feels tired. He wants to sleep. But every time he closes his eyes and sleep starts to creep in, something happens, and suddenly, he's wide awake again. It's as if someone keeps flipping a switch in his brain to awake, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. It's affecting everything in his life. He can't concentrate in class, his work performance goes down the drain. Even his hobbies become completely unenjoyable. All he wants to do is sleep. His friends and family can tell something is wrong. It's as if he has become a different person, and they urge him to go see a doctor. But the doctors tell him there's nothing they can do for him. He's perfectly healthy otherwise. He should try some natural remedies like valerian root and get more exercise. He has no idea how many days he's been awake now. 4, 5, maybe more. At this point, the lack of sleep isn't even the worst part. It's the hallucinations. Sometimes they're just a shadow dancing outside of his vision, but others are incredibly vivid, feeling more real than his now dreary life does. He had to stop going to work and class entirely since he can't concentrate for more than a couple of seconds at a time. His friends don't want anything to do with him, and who can blame them? He has uncontrollable mood swings and lashes out for no reason. He's tried every sleep remedy there is. He took the doctor's advice and exercised as hard as he ever has. But with never being able to sleep, he has no energy left. He's becoming a living zombie. He gets up out of bed but loses his balance and collapses to the floor. He tries to get up, but he can't. He'll just lie there for a while. He starts to drift away, and he readies himself for the jolt that always wakes him back up. But this time, it doesn't come. The wave of sleep that starts to wash over him feels different this time, though. It's heavier, more peaceful, and more permanent. Hi, I'm Dr. Bob, and this is SCP-966, also known as Sleep Killer. SCP-966 is the designation that the SCP Foundation has given to a creature that belongs to a group of anomalous predatory beasts, standing 1.4 to 1.6 meters tall and weighing roughly 30 kilograms. These hairless humanoids have an elongated face, a mouth full of pointed needle-like teeth, and each of their hands has 5 razor-sharp claws that can be up to 20 centimeters in length. Though unlike humans and apes, they are digitigrade, meaning that they walk using only their toes. But you won't be able to see the horrible visage of SCP-966 under normal circumstances, as they are only visible under very specific lighting conditions. They can only be viewed under light that has a wavelength between roughly 700 and 900 nanometers, which is just at the edge of the light spectrum that's visible to humans, stretching into what's known as infrared light. The only exception to this is if their skin, muscles, or organs have suffered from 2nd or 3rd degree burns, in which case, the affected areas of their body will show up under a greater spectrum of wavelengths that are visible to the human eye. Though frightening to look at, SCP-966 are actually quite weak physically, with very low muscular density. Their bones are hollow, similar to birds, and while their claws may be incredibly sharp, they are also easily broken, making them unsuited for use in combat. Additionally, they do not rest through sleep, but will, at seemingly random times, stop all movement and fall into a rest period that lasts roughly 3 to 5 minutes, after which they are able to resume their normal behavior. With all of these physical shortcomings, how did SCP-966 gain a reputation as such a fearsome hunter? The secret lies in their ability to emit bursts of a previously unknown type of wave. Hunting either alone or in pairs, SCP-966 uses this wave to inhibit its prey's ability to enter any of the restful sleep stages, and also stops the ability to microsleep. These waves have been observed to be effective at up to 20 meters, though tests have shown that they can be blocked by post-transition metals, of which lead appears to be especially effective. SCP-966 hunts and feeds on medium to large-sized animals, which includes humans. And once their quarry has been targeted by the sleep-inhibiting waves, the effect is permanent, with no method having yet been discovered that will allow them to regain the ability to sleep. Experiments have shown that unconsciousness can be induced in other ways, such as with the use of general anesthesia, though these methods have ultimately proven to be ineffective, since although the victim is unconscious, they are still not receiving any of the restful benefits of sleep while in that state. The effects of sleep deprivation on humans, both mentally and physically, are devastating. Symptoms can begin setting in after just 24 hours that can include mood swings, memory issues, and sensory impairment. After 2 to 3 days, the body's hormones become deregulated, and bodily functions like hunger, thirst, and temperature fluctuate wildly as cognitive abilities start to dramatically decline. Hallucinations, paranoia, and fits of rage are common, and the risk of death from sleep deprivation increases with each day that passes without sleep. And this is exactly what SCP-966 wants. After surreptitiously sending a burst of sleep deprivation waves at their victim, they will then stalk their prey until lack of sleep finally leads to total incapacitation, at which point SCP-966 consumes them. SCP-966 have proven to be both extremely quiet and agile when hunting. However, they have actually been observed intentionally making threatening noises around their prey, presumably to further increase their already elevated stress levels, and potentially hastening their mental degradation. On rare occasions, they will even physically assault their victim to further degenerate their mental and physical health. Some of SCP-966's prey will experience especially intense hallucinations and bouts of rage, which is theorized to be caused by prolonged exposure to multiple instances of their sleep-stopping waves. Why some victims are exposed to multiple waves when a single instance has been shown to be 100% effective is unknown, and it's hypothesized that they may only engage in this behavior when especially hungry, to try and speed up the process, though others have put forth the theory that SCP-966 may take some perverse form of joy in seeing its victims suffer prior to expiring. Wild instances of SCP-966 have been found across the globe, and while the SCP Foundation has been successful in thinning their numbers, they still exist in high enough numbers to pose a serious threat to humanity. For these reasons, they have been assigned the classification Euclid. Mobile Task Forces Iota-1 and Iota-2, codenamed the Dream Hunters and Air Chasers respectively, are continually monitoring for any reports of sudden or violent deaths related to sleep deprivation in order to identify and neutralize the remaining instances of wild SCP-966. 4 SCP-966 specimens, 3 males and 1 female, have been acquired by the Foundation, and they are currently contained in a 10 by 10 meter room that is lined with lead and equipped with infrared security cameras. Each specimen is fed 20 kilograms of meat each month, and in the event that the female specimen gives birth, the new specimen is to be taken for observation and study before being disposed of prior to reaching maturity.
The girl has been sitting in the waiting room for at least 20 minutes now, curled up on a hard plastic chair and staring at an inspirational poster on the wall. Her eyes are bleary and unfocused, with heavy dark circles that indicate she hasn't been sleeping well. She tries to focus her attention on the poster and read the words, but she's having trouble concentrating. She keeps nodding off, only to jerk back to wakefulness when her head starts to sag. This is what life is like for her after weeks of insomnia. She was just about at the end of her rope, certain that this was going to be her life from now on, until she happened to see an ad in the newspaper for a study at a local sleep clinic. She doesn't think much of that sort of thing, but she's desperate for anything that might help her to get a good night's sleep. Eventually, the door opens and a technician calls her into his office. The girl stumbles to her feet and drags herself inside. "Thanks for volunteering to be part of our study," says the technician. He's got a friendly smile and a soothing manner that instantly puts her at ease. It's obvious from his bedside manner that he's worked with lots of sleep-deprived patients before. He pulls out a clipboard and starts to make notes on a sheet of paper. "We've gone over your application and we think that you would be a really good fit for this project." Thank goodness, thinks the girl. She had just about given up hope after that long wait. She half expected that they would simply tell her that she didn't qualify and send her home to try and figure out how to get over her insomnia by herself. "So you've been having trouble sleeping," says the technician. "Tell me about that." The girl hunches her shoulders. "There's not much to tell. I've had sleep problems for years. I have really bad sleep apnea, so I've always been a rough sleeper. I toss and turn and I wake up at least several times a night, but it's really gotten bad lately. I can barely even drift off to sleep these last few weeks." The technician nods. "That's exactly the kind of problem that we want to look into here," he says. "For this study, we're going to monitor you as you sleep and see if we can diagnose this problem." She nods. The technician keeps talking, but she's not listening. She doesn't really care about the details. The important thing is that she's going to finally get a decent night's sleep. The technician leads her to a laboratory, a large room with several simple cots arranged along the walls. Next to each cot, she sees a bank of odd electronic machines. She doesn't immediately know what they're for, but she can guess. She's participated in sleep studies before, in hopes that they might be able to help cure her issues, and they usually connect machines like these to your forehead as you sleep so that they can read your pulse and brain activity. "Sorry, it's not the most comfortable arrangement," says the technician, "but all you have to do is sleep. There's a bathroom down the hallway if you need to get ready for bed. When you're ready, we'll prepare you for the next step." The girl doesn't care if the cots aren't all that comfortable in the technician's opinion. This might as well be the plushest feather bed to her. After changing into her nightclothes and brushing her teeth, the girl returns to the lab. She finds the technician waiting for her, holding what appears to be a perfectly ordinary CPAP machine. The girl, of course, recognizes this device. She's used these things on multiple occasions in her desperation to find a solution to her sleep apnea. They're supposed to help open up the breathing passageways to increase airflow and thus reduce the incidence of sleep apnea, but the girl has never had much luck with them. She frowns. If this study is just testing a new sort of CPAP machine, she doesn't have a lot of faith that it's going to help her much. The technician notices her dismay. "I know that you've probably used these before," he says. "This is just the first step. We want to see how your sleep cycles react to ordinary treatments before we try anything more radical." "Okay, sure." The girl doesn't have the strength to argue. She's bone tired, and she's ready to collapse into bed. Without another word, she takes the CPAP mask from the technician and straps it to her face. She climbs into bed, and the technician attaches the hose to the machine next to the bed. He switches it on, and the machine begins to emit a familiar, comforting hum. The technician attaches several electrodes to the girl's cheeks and forehead. He starts to explain that these will allow him to monitor her sleep cycles and check for any anomalous reactions. She's barely listening at this point. "I'll just be monitoring you from the next room," says the technician, pointing to a video camera in the corner of the ceiling. "So don't worry about anything. If there are any problems, I'll be watching." The girl barely has the strength to nod her head in response. She's so incredibly tired.
Already she's drifting into oblivion. The room is swimming before her eyes, her mind distracted by hypnagogic illusions. The technician's voice sounds like it's a million miles away. She's practically already dreaming. Her eyes close before he even leaves the room. The technician takes his station at his desk, sitting before a bank of video monitors. The grainy gray feed from the security camera shows that the girl is fast asleep in her bunk, her chest rising and falling rhythmically with her breathing. Nothing unusual going on so far. The technician takes a sip from a mug of coffee and prepares for another boring night of watching someone else sleep. Of course, he hopes that the information gleaned from his observations might be of use in helping this girl to solve her sleep problems. And he hopes in turn, that might help other people with similar sleep apnea issues as well. But for now, he's just staring at the screen with half-hearted interest. At first, everything is quiet. The CPAP machine seems to be doing the trick, allowing the girl to breathe quietly and sleep peacefully. The technician watches without interest as the girl progresses through the different levels of sleep, the monitors in front of him reflecting the changes in her biorhythms. It isn't until she reaches her second round of REM sleep, the stage in which a sleeper dreams, that something strange happens. Under her eyelids, the girl's pupils quickly flick back and forth, almost as if she's watching a film. This is totally normal behavior, of course, during REM sleep. The technician barely even looks up as the monitors register her transition into this new sleep stage. He's been working at the sleep clinic for long enough that he knows to expect this. He might not have even looked up if his coffee cup hadn't happened to finally run out. When he hefts his empty mug, mumbling to himself in annoyance that now he's going to have to walk all the way across the facility to refill it at the coffee machine in the break room, that's when he finally catches sight of it. It happens so suddenly that at first, the technician doesn't believe his eyes. He thinks it must be a glitch in the hardware or possibly that his own eyes are playing tricks on him. He has been drinking a lot of coffee to stay awake after all. But no, it's really there. He can see that there is a second person in the room now, a large, dark silhouette standing over the girl as she sleeps. He blinks in surprise. How did someone get into the building, much less the laboratory, without him knowing? The figure is silent and motionless. It hardly seems threatening, but at the same time, it's hard not to read someone as threatening when they break into your room and stare at you as you sleep. As he watches, the figure starts to change subtly before his eyes. Soon, it's not just a solid blob of shadow. It's coalesced into a human figure, that of a large male humanoid. Its torso bulging with muscles, its arms laced with sinews, but instead of a face, this figure has the gleaming white skull of a horse. It remains standing over the girl. The girl snorts and turns in her sleep, grunting and mumbling. She's acting as if she's caught in an especially troubling nightmare and is struggling to wake up. The creature standing over her does not react to her movements, instead, staring down at her with an eerie, unflappable calm. The grainy camera footage makes it hard to make out the details, but the technician is almost certain he can see the tiniest flicker, like the reflection of light in a dilated pupil, in the empty sockets of the mysterious stranger's skull. The skull doesn't react. How could it react, after all? It's just a skull. But its silence, with that rictus grin and empty sockets, only makes it more frightening than if it had reacted. The technician gulps and rises to his feet, his knees shaking. He can't let this go on. He doesn't know what kind of practical joke is going on, but he did promise the girl that he would be responsible for her safety if anything weird happened. More to the point, the presence of this masked stranger might jeopardize the results of the study. He hurries from the office, making a beeline for the laboratory. He doesn't exactly know what he's going to say or do when he confronts this stranger. He just knows that he has to do it. But then, he starts to feel sleepy himself. The closer he gets to the laboratory, the more his own body starts to defy him. His limbs feel rubbery, his eyes feel heavy, and his thoughts start to swim. Despite all the coffee in his system, he also feels himself succumbing to sleep. He's only 50 yards from the door when he finally collapses into a heap on the floor. His eyes remain wide open, staring sightlessly ahead of him, and his mouth gapes like a fish out of water. Whatever he's experiencing, whether it's something that only he can see or something in his mind, his expression reveals only abject terror. Meanwhile, at the exact moment that the technician collapses, the figure standing over the girl in the lab blinks momentarily out of existence, as if somehow reacting to the commotion outside. And when it returns, it isn't alone. A second dark figure has also appeared in the room. It too starts life as an indistinct, only vaguely humanoid shadow, but quickly starts to gain form. This one is different from the first. It's a female body, but the figure's head has a blank face devoid of eyes, mouth, or nose. This second figure ignores the sleeping girl or her strange, stoic, horse-headed observer. Instead, it starts to move, ambling toward the western wall of the room, as if it knows that the comatose technician is directly on the other side. When it reaches the wall, it does not pause. It simply phases through the solid structure, disappearing through the brick and mortar and reappearing in the hallway beyond. The faceless woman approaches the prone body of the technician. It squats down next to him and puts its hand under his chin, turning his head so that it can stare into his eyes, or stare as effectively as possible when it doesn't have any eyes of its own. After a few moments of silent contemplation, the faceless creature places its hand against the technician's forehead. Slowly, its hand starts to move through his head, reaching deep into his skull, as if its hand was as insubstantial as a ghost. Just as this mysterious nightmare creature was able to phase through the wall, it appears to be able to phase through flesh as well. After several moments, the faceless woman withdraws its hand and drops the technician's head. He slumps to the ground in response. The faceless woman stands up, and then it vanishes instantly. At the exact same time, the girl in the other room snorts and stirs. She blinks her eyes open. For a moment, she doesn't remember where she is. Her eyes scan the unfamiliar room for several seconds before she recalls that she was participating in a sleep study. That's right, she was trying to find out if she could find any help for her sleep apnea. Ironically, she actually slept better than normal. As she removes the CPAP mask, she wonders if maybe she ought to see about buying one of these for herself. This particular model seems to work better than the one she's tried in the past. She stretches and sits up. Just then, the technician bursts into the room. He's panicked and out of breath, and he whips his head back and forth in search of the mysterious horse-headed stranger. But there's no sign of the creature now. Just like the faceless woman, it seems to have vanished without a trace. The girl stares at him in confusion. Why is he so upset? She has no clue about what happened while she was asleep. "Did you see it?" says the technician breathlessly. "The creature! The shadow creature!" The girl raises a skeptical eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" she says. "I just woke up." The technician starts to sputter out an explanation, but the girl just rolls her eyes. She came here to get help with her sleep, but it sounds like the technician is the one who's got a real problem. His breathless descriptions of a horse-headed monster and a faceless woman clearly sound like bad dreams to her. You would think that a guy running a sleep study wouldn't be so easily confused like that. She's pretty sure that he probably just fell asleep at his station, and now he's embarrassed to admit that he just had a bad dream. Little do either of them know that although they won't see the strange entities again, those creatures are always going to be very, very close to them going forward. What a nightmare. But what seems like just a bad dream is, in fact, an anomaly well known to the SCP Foundation. It's formally been designated as SCP-3060, but agents more often refer to it as the Dream Machine. Instances of SCP-3060 are small medical devices that superficially resemble continuous positive airway pressure, or CPAP machines. The individual materials that compose SCP-3060 instances are non-anomalous and operate in the same way as a typical CPAP machine of its size and make. The Foundation currently has 5 instances of SCP-3060 in its custody. SCP-3060's anomalous effects become apparent when worn by a sleeping human. When an individual wearing an instance of SCP-3060 enters their second REM cycle, a humanoid incorporeal entity, hereafter referred to as SCP-3060-A, will appear within a 5-meter radius of the individual and stand over them until they wake up. At this point, SCP-3060-A will disappear, and the individual wearing SCP-3060 will become infected. From that point on, regardless as to whether the individual wears SCP-3060, the same SCP-3060-A entity will appear when they enter their second REM cycle each night and remain watching over them until awakening. While instances of SCP-3060-A appear as featureless silhouettes upon their first manifestation, they quickly take on a unique shape based on each infected individual. SCP-3060-A entities have no standard appearance, and it is not clear what factors determine the final form of any individual SCP-3060-A. Since the manifestations are connected with REM sleep, agency researchers speculate that an SCP-3060-A's appearance may be influenced by an infected sleeper's dreams. So far, observed SCP-3060-A's have included a human infant composed entirely of fused teeth, an eyeless elderly woman dressed in dark clothes, a partially disintegrated humanoid composed of ash and dressed in red lingerie, a naked humanoid covered in tire tracks and showing signs of severe crush injuries, a humanoid whose torso consisted of a large mouth, and a clown. Some researchers have noted that the initial shadowy appearances of SCP-3060-A recall descriptions of entities reported during bouts of sleep paralysis, but so far, no conclusive link has been found. While an SCP-3060-A instance is present, any person standing within a 50-meter radius of the infected sleeper will enter a catatonic state. At this point, an additional instance of SCP-3060-A will appear. The additional SCP-3060-A entity will then approach the catatonic subject, phasing through solid matter if the subject is in a separate room. Upon arriving at the subject, the new SCP-3060-A instance will phase its hand through the subject's skull and then vanish, causing the subject to fall asleep immediately. All subjects touched by the SCP-3060-A entity in this manner will become new instances of SCP-3060 infected upon awakening. Awakening an infected sleeper will cause the attending SCP-3060-A to immediately vanish and catatonic subjects to regain movement. All attempts to communicate with SCP-3060-A instances have thus far been unsuccessful. People infected by SCP-3060 will inevitably suffer long-term health effects, most often associated with severe sleep deprivation. After 3 days, infected individuals begin to display fatigue, mood changes, impaired performance, and memory problems, all of which are so severe that even obtaining a full night's sleep does little to dent their impact. Infected individuals often report frequent nightmares, though no central themes or correlations have been observed in the content of these dreams, nor do they seem to correspond with the appearance of the infected persons attending SCP-3060-A. Within a month, infected individuals will start having visual and auditory hallucinations, as well as delusions that their mind is being controlled by some outside force. Soon after, infected individuals descend into full psychosis as they become unable to distinguish the content of their dreams from reality. In extreme cases, after at least 2 months of infection, hair loss, conitis subita, partial or complete blindness, somatic complaints, cataplexy, and alien limb syndrome have been observed. Attempts by medical staff to alleviate these conditions in the long term have thus far been met with failure, although sleep deprivation has ironically proven effective in temporarily delaying the onset of more severe symptoms. If no human subjects enter the area of an SCP-3060 infected individual's effect during REM sleep for 7 consecutive days, or the infected individual dies, an instance of SCP-3060-A will appear. The SCP-3060-A entity will then proceed to search for the nearest sleeping human. Upon locating a sleeper, SCP-3060-A will stand over them until they enter their next REM sleep cycle, at which point, the SCP-3060-A entity will reach into their skull and vanish. At this point, the sleeping individual will become infected. If the sleeping individual wakes up before the process is complete, or if SCP-3060-A cannot locate a suitable subject within 3 hours, it will vanish without spreading the SCP-3060 infection. In one experiment, an infected individual was placed in a standard humanoid containment cell. 4 D-Class personnel were placed in adjoining cells. When the infected individual fell asleep and entered their second REM cycle, an SCP-3060-A entity appeared with predictable results. The first SCP-3060-A to appear resembled a headless humanoid with its arms and legs replaced by spinal columns. It stood above the infected sleeper, watching without movement, even as 4 additional instances of SCP-3060-A manifested inside the cell. All 5 SCP-3060-A instances stood in silent observation of the infected sleeper for approximately 5 minutes. By this point, all 4 D-Class personnel in adjoining cells had gone into catatonic states, seeing as they were within the 50 square meter blast zone established by the initial SCP-3060-A. Each D-Class personnel who was awake at the time of manifestation was observed to have frozen with expressions of extreme distress on their face. The 4 additional SCP-3060-A instances then began to disperse, each one moving toward a different D-Class personnel's cell, phasing through solid matter as necessary to reach the intended target. Each additional SCP-3060-A instance completed its manifestation by reaching into the skull of its target and then subsequently assuming a definite, final form before vanishing. The 4 additional SCP-3060-As, respectively, took on the appearance of a male human with mathematical symbols in place of facial features, a humanoid composed of tightly wound thread, a featureless white humanoid dressed in a Foundation lab coat, and a featureless black humanoid dressed in a hodgepodge of regalia from different authoritarian regimes. The initial SCP-3060-A continued to stand in silent observation of the original infected sleeper after the other instances vanished, remaining so for the rest of the night until she woke up. Since SCP-3060 has not been found to differ in any way from a normal CPAP machine, SCP agents currently know very little about how SCP-3060 can cause these manifestations, who is manufacturing SCP-3060, or for what purpose. At this time, the only advice that SCP researchers can offer is this. If you're having trouble sleeping and want to make use of a CPAP machine, make sure you're buying a name brand. Otherwise, you might just be opening yourself up to a world of nightmares, insomnia, and silent but all too present nocturnal visitors. The old house has been abandoned for going on 2 decades, and as with any place that's been left uninhabited for this long, rumors tend to spiral. Of course, there are the more mundane explanations for why the 2-story, 4-bedroom home on the end of a nice street lays in semi-ruin. Black mold, asbestos, rising house prices. But those weren't the stories that most people told. Everyone in the neighborhood knew what really happened. All those years ago, the family that lived there had been murdered, and their killer was never caught. The 3 young paranormal investigators, with EMF readers in their hands and GoPro cameras mounted on their hard hats, know all about this. They approach the house in the dead of night, mumbling commentary for the recordings. If the old house really is as haunted as everyone says it is, then they could be in for something really good here. Their subscribers always loved brand new paranormal content. They use a crowbar to breach the front door and head inside. It's everything you can expect from a house that had been abandoned for 17 years. Dust, cobwebs, and graffiti abound, broken bottles scattered across the floor. Someone has scrawled, "Welcome to Hell," above the door in faded Sharpie. It all plays perfectly for the cameras. Paranormal content gold. All of them turn on their flashlights, generously provided to them by one of their sponsors, of course. But in this particular situation, they have no idea just how valuable their product really is. After all, there are some frightening things that hide in the dark. The leader of the trio begins ascending the stairs, narrating into his helmet cam, giving the more popular version of the house's legend. The perfect suburban family, torn apart, literally, by a killer hiding in their home. The family had all been brutally murdered by someone in their home, but the police never found any sign of unlawful entrance or exit. There were no clues to the killer's presence whatsoever, in fact. It was as if they were a ghost, a vapor. It was almost as though whoever killed the family had always been in that house, and even after the murders were committed, they never left the place either. As he tells the story, the lead investigator starts to feel a little nervous. Even though he himself doesn't really believe in the supernatural, he just plays up reactions for the views, he still can't help but wonder, should I really be here? Am I making a terrible mistake? Is there a chance that whatever did this all those years ago could still be in the house, waiting for me? But he pushes those thoughts from his mind. This gig is too valuable for him to wimp out now, and really, what are the chances that something actually dangerous would be lurking in the house? The other 2 investigators are still looking around downstairs, sticking together, their flashlight beams slicing through the darkness. Their boss always insists on going upstairs first. He demands the glory shot, after all. That leaves the rest of them searching the downstairs living room, dining room, and kitchen, where the best they can hope for is maybe a particularly haunted-looking dishwasher. It's why the younger of the 2 is so surprised when they suddenly feel something happening to their body that they've never experienced before. In an instant, their whole body convulses with an involuntary shudder. They feel the temperature drop, and the world gets just that little bit darker. The best way they can describe the feeling is impending doom. Like any moment now, something terrible is going to happen. But almost as soon as the feeling begins, it's gone. Intensity dropping, the dread starting to dissipate, as though whoever or whatever caused this feeling literally passed right through them. Their fellow investigator asks them if they're okay. Of course, they nod and force a smile. They're fine. It's just a spooky place, is all. Atmosphere like this would get to anyone. Meanwhile, the lead investigator is exactly where he wants to be, ascending a rickety stepladder up into the attic. The very same attic where, all those years ago, the police had found what was left of the family. And from everything he'd read on the subject, their remains weren't a pretty sight, even by true crime enthusiast standards. He enters the attic and shines his flashlight around, capturing all the dusty old boxes left to rot in the cold. He's engrossed in the macabre spectacle of what had once been the worst and final moments of a group of strangers' very real lives. The attic is full of spider webs and shadows. They're so ubiquitous that as the lead investigator pauses to tell his camera the next chapter of the grisly tale, he doesn't even notice one of the shadows peeling off of the wall behind him. It wafts silently towards him like a gust of midnight air. Little by little, the blob of shadow starts to take on a vaguely human shape. It leans forward in the investigator's direction, arms extended like a classic movie monster. Long, dark claws slide out of its shadowy hands. Downstairs, the other two investigators hear the most terrible scream. For a moment, the more fantastical thought crosses their minds. Could this be one of the tormented souls of the departed family, longing to be heard after years of silence? Then it occurs to them that they recognize the scream. It belongs to their boss. The two of them charge up the stairs, flashlights in hand, as the screaming starts to become more desperate and pained, like that of a wounded animal with its leg caught in a trap. Those terrible wails are echoing down from the open hatch leading into the attic. It's so dark up there, something must have broken his flashlight. That's when they notice something else. Red, dripping from the open hatch. For a moment, they hesitate, wondering what could be going on up there. Could they really help, or would they just be running into the danger themselves? But soon, their desire to save their boss's life overpowers their fear. They grab the ladder and start climbing, feeling the dripping blood on the worn wooden rungs. When they finally get up into the attic, it feels like the scream is coming from everywhere, bouncing off the walls in a terrible, echoing cacophony of pain. They turn in all directions, hovering their flashlight beams around the room in wide, sweeping arcs, until both fall on the source of all this terror. And when they see it, they can't help but scream too. The lead investigator's body is floating about a foot off the ground, his screams now fading into pained gurgles. Something huge and dark is lifting him up with one hand and sinking the long, dark claws of its other into his neck. The second the twin flashlight beams concentrate on the creature, it drops the lead investigator's bleeding body down onto the ground. His skin slate gray, his feeble twitching slowing to a halt as the last of his life drains from him. Two glowing red pinpricks open up in the face of the dark figure, eyes like terrible, burning coals etching themselves into their memory. Like smoke, it continues to glide backwards further, seeking refuge in the dark, a safe haven amongst the other shadows. By this point, the two surviving investigators know there's nothing they can do for their boss anymore. All that's left is to get out and survive. They have to save themselves. They turn, wasting no time running towards the exit. They don't notice it, but the second they turn the beams of their flashlights away, the shadow's terrible eyes disappear, and it starts advancing towards them again, its claws outstretched and grasping for them with awful fury. The shadow creature grabs at their heads as they make their final leap for the exit. However, all the monster can pull away are their helmets and helmet cams as they scramble down the ladder and then down the stairs, running at speeds they didn't even think possible as the shadow slithers down behind them. It doesn't give up. It wants their lives. It wants their warm human blood on its claws. They clear the threshold of the accursed house and keep running to their car. One looks over their shoulder and sees the shadow leave the house, gaining on them, both claws outstretched and ready to rend their flesh. The two climb into their car. They see the shadow coming towards their window. It's moving so quickly, only a few feet away now. It's getting closer and closer and closer. Ignition. The car starts up and the driver smashes the pedal down. They take off, quickly accelerating up to illegal speeds as the shadow continues to chase, slowly getting smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror. A distant nightmare. A terrible, dark ghost. As it finally disappears, they feel a moment of safety. But really, only a moment. Because it occurs to them then that they cannot say with any confidence that this monster won't just be waiting for them when they get home. SCP-280, also known as Eyes in the Dark, is one of the more frightening and dangerous anomalies contained by the SCP Foundation. Of course, it likely won't be causing an XK-class end-of-the-world scenario anytime soon, but if you happen to run into this nocturnal monster, it's likely to cause an end-of-you scenario and remove you from the world with extreme prejudice. There's no way of telling just how many lives it claimed before the SCP Foundation finally got it into containment, and perhaps it's best to just not think about that. SCP-280 is a black wraith-like apparition that floats at roughly average human height, with no visible legs or feet, as the lower portion of its body simply fades away before it reaches the ground. In its dormant state, the entity may appear to be little more than a shadow, easily dismissed, especially in dark environments. This comes as a natural result of the being's frightening ability to become intangible at will, and only become physical when it enters a state of active aggression toward a human target. In this intangible state, victims have even been known to walk through the shadowy mass by accident. While this doesn't lead to any detrimental physical effects, victims report that being inside the creature can lead to heightened states of anxiety, fear, and dread. Despite its body being wholly composed of an unidentifiable black matter, when exposed to light, the creature does begin to express a pair of glowing dots on its head similar to eyes, hence its frightening nickname. However, all tests indicate that these eyes aren't actually functional. Instead, they appear to be a kind of defensive measure, like false eyes on the carapace of an insect. These eyes are never shown when SCP-280 is advancing towards a victim, only when it is in retreat, though this is only one of the entity's several defensive responses. If an area where the creature is residing becomes fully illuminated, or a sudden flash of extremely bright light is directed against it, then it will immediately dematerialize and appear in a different area. The one positive thing that can be said about the hunting patterns of SCP-280 is that they're relatively predictable. The entity, it seems, only has an interest in human beings. When it selects a target, it will pursue them relentlessly, approaching in its intangible form with its arms extended in what many describe as a sleepwalker pose. In this state, you may finally notice 280's claws, long, thin, and razor sharp. It may silently approach while the victim is turned the other way, or while they sleep soundly in bed, or even when they're paralyzed in fear at the very sight of it. When SCP-280 closes the distance, it will begin to rip and tear at its victims with its claws, causing massive physical trauma and, in some cases, death. Attacks range from 1 to 5 minutes of being relentlessly clawed at by the beast. When the attack is over, it will simply expose its eyes, become intangible once more, and escape. You will not be able to overpower the creature. Foundation tests have shown that it has extreme physical strength, and it's capable of tearing apart solid steel with little effort. If it can't find any humans to victimize, then it will simply remain dormant, pressing itself up against a wall, in a dark corner, or within some other structure. Which is why, if ever you feel nervous about a certain dark corner in a room near you, it is best to remove yourself from the situation as quickly as possible and remain in a brightly lit area. It would perhaps be comforting to believe that SCP-280 is acting on some twisted form of animal instinct. After all, while the results may seem horrific to us, every organism has to eat, right? Well, sadly, that isn't the case here. SCP-280 does not appear to eat, sleep, or breathe to survive, and it never consumes any of the matter torn from its victims. The best working theory is that the entity simply enjoys the harm it causes, taking a degree of perverse pleasure in hunting down and murdering its targets. There is no better nature to appeal to here. The SCP Foundation's ability to study the creature's biology has also been stunted, in part due to the creature's highly aggressive nature, and also the fact that its selective intangibility makes gaining physical samples almost impossible. Even capturing and containing the creature in the first place came partially out of blind luck. It first came to Foundation attention after a series of mysterious locked-door murders in a small Mississippi township. In the most recent case, an entire family had been brutally murdered in their home, leaving only one survivor. A traumatized 9-year-old boy named David, who'd locked himself in the basement when he started to hear the screaming. He was so terrified by the things he saw that night that he remained in a catatonic state for weeks afterwards, completely unresponsive to outside stimulus. But one little detail saved his life. A flashlight was clasped in his white-knuckle grip, shining a bright beam of cold, white light onwards. When David was removed and placed into medical care, officers began searching the building for any kind of clues as to how the other 4 family members were murdered. However, during this investigation, the police were just as vulnerable as the victims who'd been so recently slain. While one officer was wandering around the attic, looking for any evidence they may have missed, SCP-280 emerged from the darkness and attacked, tearing into his body with its long, deadly claws. Luckily for the officer in question, he survived the incident, though he was badly wounded. His report on the matter, including the ardent claim that he was attacked by a being, quote, made from black smoke, caught the attention of SCP Foundation operatives embedded in the precinct. They soon took over the investigation and descended on the house, hoping to tag and bag whatever had been behind all these deaths. this would be easier said than done. While Foundation field agents canvassed the home, they simply walked past the creature multiple times, discounting it as a mere shadow. After all, it only had these easily identifiable glowing eyes when it was in a retreating position. Even when it entered its physical state, operatives brushing up against it generally dismissed the sensation as hair, clothing, or some other object touching them in the dark. This already bungled investigation got even worse when the Foundation decided to introduce high-intensity lights into the equation, hopefully flushing the creature out. This, of course, only caused it to dematerialize and appear elsewhere. The chase ended in an almost farcical fashion, a cavalcade of Foundation agents chasing a cloud of sneering black smoke across a Mississippi field at 2:30 a.m. Thankfully for the human race, the entity was, at the very least, eventually secured and contained. However, this wouldn't be the last time it was out of containment. During a series of tests with different types of illumination, intending to test SCP-280's reflexes, it disappeared from its chamber. It seemed almost to sink through the different levels of the illuminated site before coming to rest at the containment chamber holding SCP-1591. This made for a fascinating accidental cross-test. You see, SCP-1591, to put it simply, is a unique sculpture of a star that emits an incredibly bright light, and this light will slowly make any being subject to its glow intangible before disappearing completely. When SCP-280 came before SCP-1591, it displayed its eyes, but did not retreat. In fact, it assumed a kneeling position and simply remained before the anomalous sculpture until it faded from existence. It then remanifested in its own containment chamber several hours later without incident. All things considered, it went pretty well as far as containment breaches involving deadly, human-hating monsters go. Because of its ability to demanifest and phase through solid objects, SCP-280 is incredibly difficult to contain, earning it the dreaded Keter object class. In order to avoid the risk of demanifestation, SCP-280 is contained in a 5x5 meter cell that is perpetually left in a state of total darkness. No equipment is to be left in the cell unsupervised at any time, and any items brought into the cell for testing must be removed when the testing is complete. Any staff members entering the chamber for tests must be equipped with infrared goggles, an infrared ID strobe, and also a strong flashlight to ward the creature off in the case that it becomes aggressive. If SCP-280 does attempt to attack anyone in the chamber, all attending staff are instructed to turn on their flashlights and turn the beams against the creature. No aggressive action is permitted, and staff members must remain at least 1 meter away from SCP-280 at all times for their own safety. And if you suddenly feel yourself getting a little nervous in an eerily dark room, I'd like you to remember this. The one thing more frightening than seeing eyes in the dark is not seeing them.
You're deep in the middle of a late-night study session when you hear something. It's a sort of clicking sound. You try to ignore it and get back to your books, but there it is again. You turn up your music. There, that's better. It was probably nothing. Just the house creaking. But no, there it is again. You need to figure out what is causing this. You look around. Is it coming from outside your window? Another click. It's definitely coming from outside. You slowly make your way to the window. It's dark out, and you can't see anything with the glare. Slowly, you reach out, grab the window, pull it open, and nothing. You stick your head out and look around, but there's nothing to see. You close the window and go back to studying, but then it happens again. The next morning, you're eating breakfast when you start to hear that clicking noise again, but still, nothing is there. On the bus, you could swear it's coming from the seat right behind you. No sign of anything once again. You're in the middle of your test. Vertebrae are connected to each other by... what's the word? It's not going quite as well as you hoped. It was hard to study last night with the constant clicking, but you're giving it your best. At least the noise has stopped, so you can concentrate for a bit. You jump up and look behind you, determined to catch what's making this noise, but there's nothing there. You look around at your confused classmates before sheepishly sitting back down. The cracking noise is almost endless now. You can hardly go a moment without hearing it. It goes on like this for months and months. No one else can hear it, and no one seems to believe you. On one level, you've been able to get used to it, but on another, you never have adjusted to the constant clicking that follows you everywhere you go. You're sitting on the floor of your room, concentrating, focusing hard, trying to will the noise out of your mind. You clench your eyes shut as hard as you can and put all of your mental energy towards stopping the noise, when just then, it's gone. No more clicks. You open your eyes. Could this be it? Could it all be over? You turn around to see it, but it's too late. What you have just witnessed is a textbook example of an SCP-4975 attack, an anomaly that has been aptly nicknamed Time's Up. SCP-4975 is a tall, thin entity with some vaguely avian features, most notably a beak. Its long limbs lack any distinct digits, instead tapering off into formless nubs, and a thick, hardened layer of dark skin covers its entire body, including its beak. In addition to its striking appearance, SCP-4975 is perhaps best known for the distinctive clicking sound that it makes. The vertebrae in its long neck are not connected by any intervertebral discs or other tendons, and each of these neck bones appears to be able to move independently of one another. It rotates these vertebrae constantly, one at a time, from bottom to top, ending at its head, creating a constant swinging motion of the head back and forth. It is each movement of these vertebrae that produces the distinctive clicking or cracking sound. SCP-4975's primary behavior is the pursuit and stalking of human beings. Once it has chosen a target, for reasons that still remain unknown, it will begin to follow them, and only the target will be able to hear the clicking sound, though they won't be able to determine where the sound is actually coming from. SCP-4975 will continue to stalk its victims for an extended period of time, as long as 10 months or more, until at some point it stops swinging its head, the clicking sounds cease, and 4975 attacks. In an attack, SCP-4975 uses its long appendages to club and tear the victim apart, after which it will consume them, often starting while the victim is still alive. One single human-sized cadaver appears to be enough to last SCP-4975 for several months, after which it will target a new prey and begin the process all over again. Evidence of SCP-4975 has been found as far back as 1538, with a creature very similar to it appearing in numerous German folk tales. Multiple artistic depictions from the time also show a large, black avian creature that can only be assumed to be the same anomaly. In what should be a bit of good news, SCP-4975 is currently in containment at an SCP Foundation facility, where it is confined to a standard steel containment cell. However, as you'll soon see, this containment has not resulted in the end of SCP-4975 attacks, and reports of new incidents continue to come in. In one such report from the Black Forest region of Germany, Foundation agents were investigating the case of a local man who had reported that he had been hearing a rhythmic clicking sound for over 4 months. The man assumed he was being stalked, or was the subject of a cruel prank, and asked the local authorities to look into the matter. The Foundation agents took the man into custody, giving the cover story to the local police that the man had been experiencing auditory hallucinations and paranoia as a side effect of an experimental chemotherapy he had been receiving. The agents took the man to the last place he had heard the clicking sound, which was a wooded area. As they walked through the forest, the man grew increasingly nervous until he stopped and pointed at a tree, claiming that it was where the sound was coming from. The man froze in fear as the agents drew their weapons and prepared to inspect the tree. They split up and with a tactical efficiency circled the tree on either side to find nothing. At the same time, the man screamed, pointing at a creature the agents could not see that the man claimed was coming for him. The man was thrown to the ground by his invisible assailant and struck multiple times. The agents attempted to attack where it seemed the invisible creature should be, but their fists and weapons passed through the air as if nothing was there. Another agent attempted to drag the man away, but he was pinned down by a mysterious force. A large wound began to appear on the man's midsection as his abdomen was opened up. Still unable to move the man or stop whatever it was that was attacking him, and with no other options, a Foundation agent took out his gun and terminated the man. Moments later, as the agents looked on, strips of flesh began to be torn from the body and vanish, as if an invisible creature was feeding on the deceased man. But this invisible attack wasn't even the strangest part. At the exact moment the man in Germany was killed and devoured by an unseen force, SCP-4975 was observed to be standing motionless, staring at the southeastern corner of its containment cell, and it was no longer clicking its neck. Any human contact with SCP-4975 has been disallowed, and all current research into the creature has been temporarily ceased, though it has been classified as Euclid. Following these continued attacks and the bizarre behavior it exhibits as they take place, reclassification to Keter class is pending. In the event that a containment breach takes place, it is official Foundation policy that any personnel who begin hearing a persistent, rhythmic cracking noise are to isolate themselves from other staff and calmly wait for SCP-4975 to be returned to its chamber, or for the noises to stop. Perhaps as you wait for the clicking noise to cease, you can amuse yourself with an old German nursery rhyme that is believed to have been written about SCP-4975. Its translation goes, "Tick-tock, the cuckoo clock ticks. Cuckoo, the bird inside sings. As ticks the time, so ticks your heart. May you live long as you hear its song. Listen close, for when it stops, the hatchling comes out of its home. Did you hear it? Did it stop? My child, it meant your time was up."
The flashlight beam casts demonic shadows that twist and shift with the trembling of his hands. It makes the feeling worse, seeing those shadows twitch against the walls like they're somehow alive. But shadows can't be alive, can they? Another noise, a creak that sounds distinctly like the weight of someone's soul against the floorboard. Now the man knows he hasn't been imagining it. The beam of light sweeps over the room towards the source of the noise, to reveal the source of his torment is nothing. There's nothing there. And yet every feeling, every instinct, tells him that his eyes are wrong. Listen closer. Someone's here. And yet, there's no one. Not a soul. The man sighs. He swears he thought someone had gotten inside. He decides to double-check, creating more dancing, unsettling shadows with his flashlight as he scans the rest of the living room. Nothing again. Then the kitchen. Still nothing. Back upstairs to the landing. Nobody but him. And in the bedroom? He's alone again. But he doesn't feel alone. In fact, he feels the opposite, the undeniable presence of someone else there. Or something else. He switches the flashlight back off and stays still. There's no point in trying to sleep now. The uncertainty of it all is bound to keep him awake. So he stands there, surrounded by the dark and the silence, just waiting for the next sign. Another creak, breathing, a footstep, anything. Even in the dark, it's like he can feel the eyes on him. The back of his neck bristles, hair standing to attention like a breath passing over his skin. What if it is? What if it's right there, right behind him? The flashlight is back on in a second as he turns around. The light illuminates the space behind him, and there's still nothing there. But despite finding no sign of anyone else in the apartment, despite knowing for certain he's alone, the man doesn't feel alone. It feels like there's someone watching. In fact, it's always felt like there's someone watching. Has this ever happened to you? Of course it has. Most of us, if not all of us, have at one point or another experienced that same sinister sensation. You hear something move, only to see nothing out of place. What sounds like a footstep turns out to be just the foundations of your house settling. And all the while, you can't escape that uncanny and unnerving feeling that somebody's watching you. Could they be across the street, peering in through your window? Or maybe, just maybe, they're inside, right behind you, hiding in the only place you would never look. You might write this off as just paranoia, a primal, self-preserving instinct passed down from our earliest ancestors, going haywire as it keeps a lookout for imminent threats when there are none. But it's not that. Not at all. It's both out there and in your head, all around nearly wherever you go. And it's always watching. They call it causal absent paranoia. At least, that's the official term. If you ever find yourself looking up the definition, then you'll most likely wind up reading words to this effect. The healthy brain overreacting to natural stimulus due to overindulgence, excessive stress, lack of sleep, and other such strains to the mind and body. But that's just the definition that the SCP Foundation wants you to know, and it's not hard to see why. After all, it removes that unsettling sense of mystery, the unknown factor of it all. Chalking it up to stress or overactive imagination, it reminds you not to worry, and that it's all just your mind playing tricks on you. But it isn't. Your brain is working fine, and is, in fact, warning you of danger. And that danger is SCP-3010. The Foundation's research has uncovered that the feeling of being watched stems from something very, very real, an undetectable entity that they have designated SCP-3010-1. You might be better acquainted with it as that brief dash of movement out of the corner of your eye, or the noises you can't explain. In other words, the things that go bump in the night. But if you ever get that feeling, like someone else is staring at you, observing you against your will, then that's your best indicator. You're not alone. It's in the room with you. And it's watching. Always watching. It doesn't happen every time. None of us are going around constantly feeling like some unseen entity is watching us. At least, the lucky ones aren't. While manifestations of the entity are somewhat random and inconsistent, the SCP Foundation has determined that certain requirements can first be met in order to deliberately cause SCP-3010-1 to successfully manifest. These specifics relate to the space that a person is currently inhabiting. For starters, anything too small won't work. So that's any tight or cramped spaces, single rooms, or sterile environments that are shut off from the outside world, like hospitals or prisons. Foundation containment cells also fall into this latter category. But anything bigger, particularly in houses or living spaces comprised of at least 500 square meters in terms of floor space, are prime real estate for the entity, SCP-3010-1, especially if the lights are turned down low, if not switched off completely, and if there's only one living person present inside. Now, if you were expecting that the moment you're next home alone, that you could just turn out the lights and summon SCP-3010-1, then you'd be wrong. At any rate, we wouldn't recommend trying it. Little is known about the entity itself. It has hardly anything in the way of physical traits that the Foundation knows about. In terms of where it first came from, why it depends on stalking and observing humans, or even what it wants, there are no answers. The Foundation has, however, learned the following things about SCP-3010-1. For one, it is totally imperceptible. It can't be observed at all, not in any perceivable wavelength of light. So put down the thermals and night vision goggles or the UV light. The only surefire way to tell, or rather, guess, where it is at any given time, is after any kind of reactive incident with the entity. Secondly, the Foundation has noticed that SCP-3010-1 interacts differently with human beings who display the symptoms of avoidant disorders. This can include those suffering from social anxiety or inhibition, or who are typically withdrawn. Around a full half of people with these avoidant disorders will not react to scenarios wherein the entity manifests. In short, the reactive events caused by SCP-3010-1 often don't affect those with avoidant disorders, or at least 50% of those people. However, the half that the entity can interact with often feels the effects of SCP-3010 with a lot more intensity. The unnerving feeling of being watched becomes full-blown, inescapable paranoia. As for what exactly SCP-3010-1 looks like, the Foundation is at a loss. Given the entity can't be perceived, it makes getting a witness sketch or a mugshot somewhat tricky. However, there is one thing that the SCP Foundation knows for sure. It does have the limitations of a physical form. This isn't an incorporeal, ethereal ghost that it can phase through walls and other solid objects. SCP-3010-1 has a physical presence, and it seems to have an awareness of this. It's for that reason it won't manifest in smaller spaces like single-occupant rooms or particular places with no windows or doors like Foundation containment cells. By avoiding these places, it can't be trapped. SCP-3010-1 remains passively hostile toward human beings, and it will only directly engage a subject when a certain number of set triggers are met. Those that inadvertently cause this to happen find themselves receiving a particularly grim fate. Those who actively seek out or attempt to hunt the entity, especially with the intent to destroy it, are more likely to cause SCP-3010-1 to manifest. Sometimes it's worth trying to ignore the ominous sound of creaking coming from deep within your house rather than going looking for what made it. Anyone spending a prolonged period of time around mirrors is also likely to trigger a manifestation. The same can be said for those in unlit or dimly lit rooms, along with those who endure a long period of isolated, continuous silence, or make any attempt to call anyone else for help. With enough of these factors met, enough space, a lack of lighting, and no more or less than one person in a room or house, SCP-3010-1 will manifest and trigger what is known as a reactive event. This can be achieved by doing anything that increases the adrenaline levels of an isolated person, from creepy noises to the instinctive sensation that comes from being directly watched. Those few who have managed to survive their encounters with the entity have described the symptoms of SCP-3010 coming from behind. They will experience the observation or presence of another being coming from directly behind them. Should they find themselves backed against a wall, they will feel compelled to avoid the nearest window or dark corner. Mirrors are also a cause of major aversion for these victims, often causing those experiencing causal absent paranoia to flee to other rooms without any reflective surfaces present. Anyone currently undergoing the effects of SCP-3010 additionally will not be able to just sleep it off either. The symptoms caused by the impending presence of the entity directly inhibit a person's ability to fall asleep, not just out of fear, but due to a fundamental function of SCP-3010-1. The entity can manipulate the areas of the human brain that are responsible for the production of melatonin, the induction of sleep states, and the regulation of dreams. The SCP Foundation has discovered this disruption to sleep is caused by a gaseous substance that is dispersed into the local atmosphere. In order to avoid detection by the public, this phenomenon has also been given a medical classification: Causal absent Paranoia-Induced insomnia. Being unable to sleep or escape the feelings of being watched, the observed victim will inevitably panic. This is what prompts the reactive event. Usually, SCP-3010-1 will manifest through mirrors or windows. Upon manifestation, the entity then proceeds to kill its target. It extracts some vital material from their body, then sucks what is left of them into the breach that it emerged from. When a reactive event has been triggered, SCP-3010-1 deploys a cognitohazardous effect as well. This total memory erasure acts in the way you might expect. Any memories of the targeted person involved in an SCP-3010-1 manifestation will be quickly destroyed. Anyone who might remember them, might think to check on them if they've been missing for a time, will cease to have any recollection of said person. Once the entity has them, it's as if they no longer exist. Of course, this total memory erasure can be circumvented with enough written evidence of a person's existence kept at all times, or with a number of Scranton reality anchors active in the nearby area. Once it has successfully manifested, retrieved a target, and dispatched them, some Foundation researchers believe that SCP-3010-1 enters into a state of stasis. This is known to attract reflective surfaces in the surrounding area, making mirrors or windows appear opaque. Symptoms associated with SCP-3010 are also experienced by any and all human beings within a certain radius of the reactive event. So even if you start to feel like there's someone watching you and look over your shoulder to find no one's there, then you could still be in the clear. Although, that might mean someone nearby wasn't as lucky as you were. Following the manifestation, the immediate vicinity of the completed reactive event will undergo a rapid deconstruction. A spatial anomaly takes place, causing the room or location where the target has recently been taken from to expand into a number of tight, dark corridors and various small rooms that will each be filled with mirrors and other reflective surfaces. To date, the Foundation has only recorded a handful of these reactive events, and thankfully, the spatial anomaly that triggers in their wake will normally dissipate after several hours. However, the paranoid symptoms of SCP-3010 will persist in the local area, which has led some researchers to question the validity of the entity going into stasis. There are those who believe it doesn't take breaks. While avoidant personality disorders can either have an extreme repelling or extreme attracting effect on an SCP-3010-1 entity, those with an excessive compulsion for human interaction, in particular sociopaths, produce a far different and far stranger effect on the entity. Sociopathy is a mental health condition wherein somebody will consistently show that they have a lack of regard for the moral notions of right and wrong. While not all are violent, many sociopaths will often ignore the feelings of others, unless they are attempting to manipulate those feelings. For example, appeasing somebody else to make themselves seem more likable and thus garner validation. Interactions between sociopaths and instances of SCP-3010-1 will often lead to the causation of several severe anomalies. One such sociopath has been incarcerated under the SCP Foundation, serving as a member of D-Class, the disposable subgroup of personnel comprised of violent criminals who often find themselves acting as human test subjects for anomalous experiments. This D-Class, D17729, also known as Mike, is selected for testing involving SCP-3010. The SCP Foundation constructs a specialized dummy house designed to keep the entity trapped. Inside these dummy households, a D-Class is placed, typically one that exhibits extremely reclusive tendencies. They are not told of the existence of SCP-3010-1, nor are they told what the entities are capable of. The D-Class in these houses must each believe that they are well and truly isolated, abandoned alone with the entity. Mike, being one of the D-Class assigned to an SCP-3010-1 containment house, has a video and audio recording device surgically implanted within his body before he awakens inside the dummy house. Confused, he examines his surroundings, searching the area for signs of anyone else living in what he momentarily believes is a real household. He traverses from the bedroom down the hallways towards the staircase, leading from the upper floor down to a foyer. All the while, early symptoms of SCP-3010 begin to surface. Mike checks behind himself as though he's starting to feel like someone is watching him. He tries to convince himself that he's alone. There's nobody behind him. Making a move for the front door, Mike finds he can't open it. He's sealed inside the house. Over the course of the next 3 hours, he navigates his way across the entire containment cell, occasionally musing to himself. More rapidly, he begins to experience the unnerving symptoms of causal absent paranoia, developing an aversion to the darker areas of the house. A few days later, Mike finds himself keeping all the lights on and deliberately avoiding mirrors. He has to practically argue with himself that he's not afraid of the dark, just in order to go downstairs to the storage room for food. On his eventual way down there, he thinks he spots something in the house with him. Fleeing for his life, he locks himself in the storage room for an entire day, preferring to stay where there is food and light. Within a day, his SCP-3010 has become so bad that he's convinced there's something in the containment house with him. He fashions the shelving units from the storeroom into a makeshift barricade. Following his first whole week in containment with an SCP-3010-1 entity, Mike has stayed put in the storage room. He uses additional light fixtures to keep the room bright and begins tearing wiring out of the walls with the use of a makeshift crowbar. Thanks to his previous experience as an electrical engineer, after 9 days, he then creates a makeshift suit covered in light fixtures powered by a portable, hand-crank generator. Donning his light suit, Mike sets out to find and destroy SCP-3010-1, something we know only attracts it more. But after searching the containment cell for 4 hours, Mike falls asleep. This is incredibly rare in the presence of SCP-3010-1 instances, if not impossible. When he reawakens, he not only finds the storage room resupplied by Foundation personnel, but also that the lights have all been put out. Frantically, almost completely unhinged at this point, Mike looks for a weapon to fight any SCP-3010-1 he can find. The next day sees Mike rapidly searching through the containment house for SCP-3010-1 entities. Thinking he's found one, he rushes towards it while exclaiming he has light and for the entity to come out. When he approaches, an SCP-3010-1 reactive event starts, but unlike the other recorded instances, seems to fail. 3 mirrors nearby start to produce a low level of light, causing Mike to investigate. The moment he makes contact with one of the mirrors, he screams. The connection to his recording device is lost, and the containment site undergoes a spatial anomaly. In the interest of recovering any evidence of this different reactive event and finding whatever remains of Mike, the SCP Foundation dispatches a team to investigate the ruined containment site. This unit is comprised primarily of the 8 members belonging to Mobile Task Force 066, also codenamed 8 Blind Men. Led by their captain, the unit is also overseen by a Foundation researcher named Dr. Obrent. As the team enters the ruins of the containment house, they maintain a clear line of communication with Dr. Obrent via radio. With no idea what will happen once the team is inside, everyone is on high alert, told to look out for cognitohazards or any interruptions of their mental faculties. Upon entry, everything goes quiet. For 10 long minutes, there isn't a word from the team. Then comes the eventual report from the captain. The spatial anomaly is in full effect. Dr. Obrent remarks on the long delay of 10 minutes, but the captain insists that, from his and the team's point of view, it was only 30 seconds. They quickly reach the conclusion that the spatial anomaly triggered by an SCP-3010-1 reactive event has, this time, resulted in time dilation. The team navigates their way through a repeating series of hallways, finding themselves in a copy of the foyer of the ruined containment site. It's only then that the captain realizes something is wrong. The team is down a man, MTF-066-8, but his men are confused. They tell him that there are only 7 members of MTF-066. Dr. Obrent concurs. The captain then points out that MTF-066-6 and MTF-066-7 are also both missing. Once again, the rest of the team insists they've never even heard of those people. Their team has always had 5 members. It's as if they can't remember, or their comrades have been erased from existence. 8 blind men were rapidly whittled down from 5 to 3 to just 1. The captain was lost and alone, frantic and paranoid. His remains are never recovered, and before long, the Foundation is forced to accept that their mobile task force, the 3 blind men, have all been killed in action, with no sign of the missing D-Class D-17729. But a series of unauthorized addendums have been left on the SCP-3010 file in the Foundation's archive. They seem to have been left by Mike, who recalls his old D-Class designation number. He describes being lost in a series of endless dark halls with only a few small rooms. He says that they probably hate it here because it's a waste of all their eyes. The entity has eyes. They've got eyes in the back of their head. They've got eyes in the back of their mouth. They don't like us, Foundation, but they watch us. They watch us for so long. Why do they hate us, Foundation? Why do they hate me? Why is it so dark? The addendum from Mike ends with him describing his entity coming out of the mirror. He says there's one for every room. Right behind him. Right behind you. Right behind all of us.
A young man is with a group of friends eating lunch in their college cafeteria. His friends are talking and laughing, but they soon notice that the young man has hardly said a word. He seems distracted by something. Sitting a few tables away is a young woman. She's eating by herself, and in fact, the whole table around her is empty. As he stares, one of the young man's friends leans over and tells him to snap out of it, that the young woman he is staring at is weird, and he's better off leaving her alone. The young man doesn't think she looks weird. In fact, he thinks she looks nice. Plus, he's seen her in one of his classes, and she doesn't seem strange, just shy. The young man's friends watch as he gets up from his table and goes to sit across from the young woman. She seems surprised when he tells her hi, as if she doesn't know what to say back. The young man tells her that he's seen her in his anatomy class and introduces himself to her, extending a hand. After a brief moment, she returns his handshake. She's seen him in the class too. The two start talking, having one of those awkward first conversations that happen with someone you like. They talk a bit about their class. They both find it very difficult, about their majors, both pre-med, and where they live, he on campus, her off. The young man needs to get going to his next class, but he asks if she wants to study together sometime. She seems hesitant, but then agrees to at least exchange phone numbers. The young man walks away from the table with a big smile on his face. That night, the young man is studying in his dorm. His roommate asks him if he wants to come with him to a party, but the young man tells him no, he has a big test coming up and he needs to focus on it. His roommate leaves, and he checks his phone for the 100th time that night. Still no messages. Just as he sets it back on his desk, though, it chimes. There's a text, and it's from her. This stuff is really hard. Do you want to study together? The young man is excited. Of course he wants to study together. Where? Her apartment? Great! The young man doesn't waste any time, grabs his jacket and his books, and heads out. It's starting to snow lightly as he bikes to her apartment, which is a couple miles off campus. He's feeling a little nervous as he locks up his bike and walks to her door. He knocks, and the door opens. There she is, the young woman, looking just as nice as she did in the cafeteria. The young woman shows him into her apartment. She offers him a glass of wine before they sit down and get to studying. In between quizzing each other on the human circulatory system, the two chat, getting to know each other a little better. Eventually, she tells him that she has something she needs to ask him. She wants to know if he thinks she's weird. The young man is taken aback and answers no, not at all. She tells him that she knows it sounds stupid, but when she was younger, the rumor went around her school that she was some kind of witch. She didn't know if maybe someone from her childhood was still spreading that story around. The young man hadn't heard that, but he wanted to know why someone would think that. Because you do dumb stuff when you're a kid, she tells him. You read about a ritual in an old book and try it just for fun. Nothing happens, of course, but don't tell anyone that you tried or you'll never live it down. They look outside, and the snow has really started to fall. It's getting late, too. Does he want to stay the night? The young man would love to. The bike ride back to campus will be much easier in the morning. She tells him to wait just a minute and goes into her bedroom. The young man is nervous. He's never been in this kind of situation before, if it even is a situation at all. He's never had a girlfriend or even kissed a girl before. Could tonight be the night? The bedroom door opens, and the young woman comes out with blankets and pillows for the couch. She tells him to make himself comfortable, and she'll see him in the morning. The young man is disappointed, but what did he expect? She just wanted someone to study with. It was dumb of him to think that she might like him just because he had a little crush on her. Maybe they'll be great friends, though. The young man lies on the couch and watches the snow fall outside. It's so peaceful and quiet here, not like the dorm where someone is always making noise. He watches snowflakes pass by the window as his eyes start to grow heavy, and he drifts to sleep. What was that? The young man jolts up. He could have sworn he heard something. He listens, but now there is only silence. He lies back down and closes his eyes. It must have been a dream. No, there it is again. A popping noise. Then more sounds, snapping and ripping like moist meat squished and torn. What is going on? The young man gets up off the couch and looks around. It sounds like it's coming from the bedroom. Her bedroom. The door is closed, though. There don't appear to be any lights on. But the strange sounds continue. The young man doesn't know what's happening in there, but he feels extremely nervous. He takes a step towards the door and the noises stop. What should he do? Will she be mad if he knocks? But what if something is happening in there? What if she needs his help? He has to risk it. He needs to check that everything is all right. The young man knocks lightly on the door. No response. He knocks a little harder. Hello? Are you okay? Still nothing. Is he really going to do this? His heart is pounding. He grips the doorknob and slowly twists it, cracking the door open ever so slightly. It's dark in her room. A small beam of moonlight coming through the frosty window is the only source of light. He opens the door a bit wider. I hope it's okay if I come in, he says. I heard something and... The young man freezes in terror. Lying there on the bed, illuminated by the moonlight, is the girl. But not the whole girl. It's just her body. Her head has been ripped off at the neck. Unfortunately, this student will never get ahead in his anatomy class, because even something as innocent as a study date can turn bad quickly when your partner is the strange and dangerous creature which many refer to as the Penanggalan, but is better known to the SCP Foundation as SCP-1060. SCP-1060 is the designation given to the human female, both body and head included, who answers to the name Adila. In interviews with the subject, she has reported her age as being 22 years old, and she is fluent in the Malay language, with some additional proficiency in Malaysian English, which is a form of English that, unsurprisingly, combines elements of British English and Malaysian. The subject has told interviewers that she is trained as an obstetrics nurse, also known as an OB, a type of nurse that specializes in helping to care for women and fetuses during pregnancy, labor, and childbirth. It would seem at first glance that SCP-1060 is a completely normal young woman, and that is true, but only during the day. At night, SCP-1060 undergoes some rather strange changes to her physiology. In the evening, roughly 80 minutes after SCP-1060 has fallen asleep, her head and certain internal organs, including her heart, lungs, liver, and the majority of her digestive system, will physically detach from the rest of her body. This occurs with a sudden jerking motion that rips the head and organs from the body, leaving a large gaping hole in the subject's neck. The now detached head and trailing organs will begin to levitate through a process that has yet to be explained by SCP Foundation researchers. They will begin to float around the room they are in as other physical changes take place. The subject's tongue will increase in size to roughly 22 centimeters in length and will begin flicking at the air much in the same way that a snake does.
The subject's upper and lower canine teeth also increase in both size and sharpness, all while the body her head was once firmly affixed to will remain lying in the same position as when the head detached. If there is food present, SCP-1060 will use its dangling intestines as a sort of prehensile limb, lifting the food with its guts up into its mouth, where it will tear at it with its razor-sharp teeth. Once it is finished feeding, the disembodied head will dip its exposed organs into a tub of rice wine vinegar. Exposing the organs to the vinegar has an immediate effect, causing them to shrink in size, such that they will then fit into the exposed neck hole on the waiting, headless body and can be stuffed back into the body cavity. The head then appears to seamlessly reattach itself to the body. The tongue and teeth return to their normal size, and no signs remain that the head of this body was just floating around of its own volition moments ago. SCP-1060 claims to have no knowledge that any of this takes place, insisting that she sleeps quite normally. Her complete unawareness of her condition has led her to be very insistent that she be released from Foundation containment, and frequently requests that she be allowed to contact her family members. So far, both of these requests have been denied. A head that rips itself from its own body at night and flies around with its exposed organs dangling beneath it is an extremely unsettling image. But this is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what makes SCP-1060 truly horrifying. Just as the many Malay legends and myths describe, this creature's favorite foods are children and unborn fetuses carried by pregnant women. The Foundation learned this fact in a particularly unsettling incident, which has been designated SCP-1060.01A. During this incident, a researcher who was in her second trimester of pregnancy entered the containment chamber of SCP-1060 while it was engaged in its nighttime cycle behavior in order to refill the basin of vinegar that would allow it to return to its complete human form. Despite not having previously shown aggressive behavior towards staff, as soon as the researcher entered the chamber, SCP-1060 immediately flew at her. It used its dangling intestines to restrain the researcher, and results were not pretty. Sadly, neither the researcher nor the fetus that she was carrying survived. Following this incident, the containment procedures for SCP-1060 were updated to specify that members of staff who are pregnant or suspect that they may be pregnant are not allowed into the containment chamber during its nighttime cycle. While the origins of SCP-1060 and just how this young woman came to possess these anomalous properties are unknown, there are numerous tales, most originating from Malaysian folklore, that describe a creature that is quite similar. Known as the Penanggalan, it is a creature akin to a vampire, though with one key difference. This monster chose to become what it is. Malaysian myths tell of a method some women use to become Penanggalan, where they will meditate while taking a ritual bath in vinegar. Their entire body must be submerged except for their head, and through a black magic process, they gain the ability to have their head detach from their body and turn into something that looks quite similar to SCP-1060. Some modern interpretations of the legend describe it not as a choice, but as a curse, or as the result of breaking a demonic pact, but they all have the same result for the woman in question. As SCP researchers continue to look into this bizarre and quite dangerous anomalous entity, she is kept contained in a humanoid observation and detention cell at all times in Site-33. While she is in her complete human form during the day, she is given food from the on-site cafeteria, but during her nighttime phase, she is provided with 0.8 kilograms of human placental material, and she is to have access to a basin that contains at least 4 liters of rice wine vinegar. The lack of knowledge about just what this anomaly is and the threat it poses to certain populations has led to it being classified as Euclid. And though progress has been slow, it is hoped that one day it will be better understood, and perhaps once it is, Adila can finally go home.
There are bloody footprints on the snow outside the house, but those are nothing compared to the carnage that unfolded inside. Blood in every one of the 3 beds, pooling against the mattresses, an almost empty dog kennel full of mangled fur, and every sharp object in the house, knives, scissors, saws, screwdrivers, all laid out on the kitchen table, stained from the night's work. In the living room, where until recently there had been so much screaming, next to the Christmas tree sits 3 large gift-wrapped boxes. They're each labeled Daddy, Mommy, and Billy. None of the boxes seem big enough to contain a whole human, but it's remarkable how well a person will fold when you know the right tendons and ligaments to cut. And he knows. After all, he's had a long time to practice and a lot of people to practice on. But Daddy, Mommy, and Billy are the lucky ones. Little Tyler is still alive, but he's somewhere else now. And the fate that awaits him is far, far worse. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Joyful Kwanzaa, and Freaky Festivus. Watch closely and remember everything I'm telling you, especially if you happen to live in the Northern Hemisphere, because between the nights of December 21st and January 2nd, regardless of what you're celebrating, or whether you even celebrate at all, there's something else looking to indulge in its own brand of sadistic holiday fun. SCP-4666, also known as the Yule Man. What separates the Yule Man from a number of other murderous anomalies that the Foundation is unable to contain is that the Yule Man is exceptionally violent and cruel. If you find yourself in the middle of one of his infamous Weissnacht events, he won't just kill you, he'll subject you to truly unimaginable torment after doing the same to your entire immediate family. There is no such thing as a quick and painless death when you fall into his gnarled clutches, but there is one advantage. One reason not to give up hope under the threat of the Yule Man. While he may be a supernatural serial killer who has operated across the top side of the globe for potentially thousands of years, he's still a serial killer. And like many serial killers, his murderous activities are subject to a number of time-worn patterns, rituals, and routines. If you can familiarize yourself with these data points, learn to recognize them, and act before it's too late, you may stand a fighting chance of making it through the Weissnacht. So let's explore one of my case files on the matter and see what we can learn. We'll return to the Yule Man in just a moment, but first, I have a question directly for you. Is something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? Regardless if you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or if you're just a human who lives in this world who's going through a hard time, therapy can give you tools to approach your life in a very different way. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and more accessible, and this is an important mission because finding a therapist can be really hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. There's a link in my description. It's betterhelp.com/DrBob. Clicking that link helps support this channel, but it also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp, so you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. And because finding a therapist is a little like dating, if you don't really fit with that therapist, which is a common thing with therapy, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost, without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/DrBob. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. And now, back to the Yule Man. Think back. You're 10 years old, and it begins on an unusually cold December. The snowfall is heavier than expected, even for your part of the world at this time of year. Usually, something like this would fill you with wonder. But for some reason, as you look out of your window at the crisp, white carpet coating your backyard, you feel a strange sense of icy dread creeping over you. Part of you wants to dismiss it. It's Christmas, after all, the most wonderful time of the year. But if you want to be sure you'll see another Christmas, you heed those feelings of dread. You see, when you experience that kind of shapeless unease, it's sometimes because your instinctual mind, the primitive part of your limbic system designed to detect predators, has noticed something that your modern conscious mind has not. Something that means to do you terrible harm. Little signs like this are what you'll need to be on the lookout for over the first 7 days of these nightmarish 12 days of Christmas, because many who don't wind up meeting an awful fate. Soon enough, it won't just be a feeling. You'll start to see him. At first, it'll be from a distance, and you might even brush it off as your overactive imagination. Maybe you wake up on the second day, wipe the sleep from your eyes, and wander over to the window to see if it's still snowing. It is, of course, but it isn't the snow that's catching your eye. It's something in the distance, little more than a speck against the distant tree line. But somehow, You still notice it. Is that a person? How could it be? They'd have to be 7 or 8 feet tall to still be visible from this distance. Somehow, you just know it's watching you, that you've been selected for something ancient and terrible. But you make the unwise choice not to tell anyone. You're worried about what your parents will say. What if they think you're lying? Then you won't get any presents from Santa Claus this year. This very instinct is why the Yule Man appears to children first. He likes to toy with his victims, drawing out their fear and confusion. If your parents are understanding enough, you might be able to save all of your lives at this stage. Around this time of year, SCP Foundation web crawlers and internet information specialists will be scouring social media for any signs of an impending Weissnacht event. As little as it seems, even a Facebook or Twitter post from your mom or dad about the strange, unusually tall peeper watching you from the forest might be enough to trigger the Foundation into sending some field agents to your home. Once there, they'll probably make up some excuse about a dangerous chemical leak in your area, or a belief that you're being targeted by some known fugitive or dangerous gang. You'll be escorted away to a secure safe house where you'll be guarded by a mobile task force for the remainder of the 12 days. But really, what are the odds that your parents will believe you at this stage? Unlike the Yule Man himself, you're not out of the woods yet. Over the next few days, you'll notice that you see him again, and each time he gets a little closer. Of course, you'll make excuses. He's still too distant to really make out as he stands in the field between the woods and your home. Maybe he's a stranger just going for a walk or stargazing. He's just standing awfully still is all. Sometimes you'll see him for a split second, and as soon as you look back, he's gone. Perhaps testing the waters, you'll start trying to bring it up with your parents. You tell them you've been seeing a strange man on the grounds outside your home. They seem a little concerned at first, but they brush it off and put on a brave face. They tell you everything will be fine. It's probably nothing. Why would anything bad happen to a lovely little family like yours? Maybe you'll feel okay for a little while after that. Your parents always know exactly how to comfort you. They've got no idea that, in this case, that comfort is putting you all in greater danger. But as the days progress, the presence of your singularly unpleasant guest will become both harder to ignore and harder to do anything about. On the morning of the 6th day, you'll wake up screaming. Up until now, you will only have seen the mysterious figure from a distance, a long, dark shadow against the snow. But now, his terrible face is pressing up against your bedroom window. He's only there for a moment before your screams send him packing, but even that moment is enough to scar him into your mind for a lifetime. He looks weathered and impossibly old, eyes beady and coal black, a smile like a burlap sack full of broken glass, face framed by a scraggly gray beard. Somehow you get the sense that you're staring into the face of pure and absolute evil. Your parents run in, worried that maybe you've had an accident of some kind, but when you tell them it's the strange man again, this time with his face up against the window, their expression takes on a different kind of concern. Two things may happen at this point. If you're lucky and your parents take your concern seriously, your lives may be saved. If they go to the police and report an incident of stalking, there's a possibility that a Foundation field agent embedded in some level of the chain of command will flag this as a precursor to a Weissnacht event. In comes the Foundation to the rescue once again. But if your parents don't believe you, or perhaps even scold you for telling lies, then you're just kicking that can a little further down the road. Though, of course, after the 8th night, when the Weissnacht event enters its second phase, you won't be the only one noticing strange things around the house anymore. On day 8, your mother starts noticing something while your father is out at work. She swears she can hear footsteps in the attic, just pacing back and forth, like it's waiting for something it's extremely excited for. Your mother goes up to check, but there's nothing in the attic. Maybe it's rats or birds in the wall. Not ideal, but manageable. However, when she hears it again the next day, she's certain that it can't be anything but human footsteps up there. She's starting to share your fears, but for some insane reason, she doesn't see what you've been seeing and what she's been hearing are connected. If she did, she might have been able to save you all. Instead, she tells your dad about the strange footsteps. He feels a little worried, but he doesn't want to go to the police about it. He decides he'd rather buy your family an early Christmas present, a Smith & Wesson revolver. If anyone is messing with his family, he's going to prove that he can deal with it himself, like a real man, as though any one man could ever save you all from what's coming. As the days go on, the eerie little sights continue to progress. There are bumps in the night, like someone is in the house downstairs. Your father palms his new revolver and sneaks downstairs, ready to head off the intruder at the pass. But again, there's nobody down there. It's almost like you're being haunted. This feels even more true when the smells start. It's a pungent, rotting odor that lingers around different parts of the house, like something died in the walls. Your parents think about hiring some kind of professional, but the smell often seems to disappear as soon as it arrives. All strange little things, and if you or your parents had been able to put all the pieces together, you'd know something was very wrong. But holiday stress gets to a lot of people. It's easy for certain things to slip through the net. Normally, this might result in a few missed meetings or forgotten errands. Here, it could result in all of your horrible deaths. On the 12th night, when an ill wind blows and the snow is heavy and thick, he will descend upon your home in the cover of darkness with horror and madness on his mind. You and your family ignored all the signs, and this is your reward. This is the Weissnacht. There are two ways this can go for you, the lucky way or the unlucky way. And once you've heard how horrible the lucky way is, the unlucky way will truly churn your stomach. If you're lucky, none of your family will be murdered during the Weissnacht event. Instead, you'll wake up with presents at the foot of your bed. How lovely! Except these presents were given to you by the Yule man, not Santa Claus. And as such, they aren't made by a workshop of happy little elves. They're made by and of the Yule man's former victims. Yes, you'll be scarred for life, but at least you'll have a life to live, even if you'll need to spend a fortune on therapy. But let's assume that you won't be that lucky. The Yule man has taken thousands of lives over the years, and he's gotten extremely good at infiltrating homes without being detected. He'll pass through your halls like a shadow, not being heard or seen unless he wants you to. If he decides that he wants this to be a more leisurely evening of slaughter, then I'm afraid there's nothing you're going to be able to do about what comes next. Using either his own collection of rusty old tools or common household objects he's just collected on site, he'll silently incapacitate each member of your family in their beds, rendering you totally defenseless. He'll then drag each member of your family into a single room, usually the living room, and begin his twisted work. Some of the recorded case studies will give you an idea of what to look forward to in this scenario. In the 1400s, the Yule man attacked a family in Croatia. When the town's authorities, including an archbishop, viewed the scene, they commented that the family was made to suffer greatly before they died, and that paganistic symbols were written on the walls in blood. Centuries later, he was recorded attacking a family in pre-colonial Canada. Only one young girl was able to escape and run to a nearby village, where she told the authorities that a naked man had broken into her house and killed her family. The rest of her family were found at the family home, hung upside down, completely devoid of blood, and showing clear evidence of torture. And in the 60s, a family in the Soviet Union was found in the aftermath of a Weissnacht event. They had been restrained, burnt, beaten, and even bitten hundreds of times. Analysis of the bite marks showed that the Yule man's teeth didn't match any known animal or human. These are all the things you can look forward to if the Yule man decides he wants to incapacitate you and take his time. No survival advice would better your chances here. There's no bargaining, begging, or pleading. The Yule man is beyond reason. But if the Yule man decides he wants a chase tonight, it's a very different story. He'll enter through the front door, brazen and proud of what he's about to do. He knows you won't call for help. He's already disabled any landline phones or alarm systems connected to the home so he can have privacy for his favorite night of the year. Perhaps your father will hear him first, just like all the phantom footsteps in the days before. He's got his Smith & Wesson gripped tightly, but nothing will prepare him for what he finds standing in the hallway, waiting for him. The Yule Man is a nightmare made flesh, too tall, too gnarled, too ancient and unclothed. He grins his broken glass grin and produces a long, curved, rusty blade. He lifts it up as if to say, "See, I'm going to use this on everyone you love." Of course, your father won't stand for that. He levels the Smith & Wesson and empties the cylinder into the Yule Man. He seems to show some brief discomfort at being shot 6 times, but don't you think that if it were this easy to neutralize the legendary Yule Man, somebody would have done it already? The Yule Man smiles again and starts walking towards your father. This is when the screaming starts. You sit bolt upright in bed and see that your mother is already in your room, eyes glazed with frightened tears. At this point, your father is a lost cause. But there's still some hope for you and your mother to escape if you make the right decisions. But what are the right decisions right now? Knowing her husband is probably dead, but wanting to do everything she can to protect her child, she begins barricading your door from the inside. If nothing else, that will buy her some time to think of a plan. As she hears the footsteps of the Yule Man slowly trudging upstairs, her eyes turn to the window. While you bombard her with panicked questions, she starts grabbing your bedsheets and twisting them into a makeshift rope. Hopefully, it'll hold. As the Yule Man starts knocking on the door with mocking delicacy, she throws open the window and flings the bedsheet rope out. She dries your tears and tells you to climb down the rope, to run across the snow to the nearest town, and not stop until you get there. You ask her if she's coming too, but as the Yule Man pounds against the door with his twisted fists, you already know the answer. She kisses you and tells you she loves you as you start to rappel down the rope out of the window. The cold night air nearly takes your breath away, but not nearly as much as hearing the wood of your door splinter and your mother scream as the Yule Man descends on her with all of his terrible fury. You can't afford to think about what's happening to her. All you can do is run across the snowy field away from your house, feeling the intense cold sting the soles of your feet. If you don't freeze to death during the run, you fear that the Yule Man will leave the house and give chase, making all of your parents' sacrifices worth nothing. But as much as you try to run, the Yule Man can run a lot faster. You turn and see the long, spindly legs of the Yule Man bounding after you. As you try to scream, the icy fingers of your pursuer close around the top of your head and yank you sharply off the ground. Your crying and pleading are muffled by heavy burlap as you're shoved into an old sack and shrouded in darkness. You can try struggling, but I can't say with any confidence that it will better your situation. You may have survived the night, but worse horrors await. The Yule Man is taking you to his workshop. When you next wake up, you'll be inside a cave with many others like you kidnapped from all over the Northern Hemisphere. You'll spend your days and nights making toys out of human remains, and how long you'll be able to eke out your survival will depend on how good you are at this task. Sadly, we don't have any records of people getting out of the workshop and going on to live a long and fulfilling life. If the Yule Man gets hungry, he might just eat you on a whim. And as for if you decide that the toy-making life isn't for you, well, those who can't make the toys become the toys. So just out of morbid curiosity, what will happen if you and your family don't survive the Weissnacht event? What if your parents are slaughtered and you're either eaten or transformed into a twisted toy? The Foundation has its own protocols for this too. They'll clean up the crime scene, perform autopsies, collect evidence, and contain any toys made out of human remains. They'll plant a fake story in the press about a family tragically killed in a regular, non-anomalous home invasion. They'll then take the data they gained from this incident and incorporate it into their predictive models for Weissnacht incidents, hoping that maybe your deaths will give them a better chance of stopping the next ones. But it doesn't matter how many times we try to stop it, the Yule Man will never die. He'll always come back, just as hungry for blood and pain as ever. All you can ever do is look out for the signs and hope that this year it isn't your turn to be on his very naughty list. Happy holidays, folks.
A kindly-looking old woman is carrying groceries into her home. When she closes the door, a crack forms in the wall, and a tile slides down off her roof, crashing to the ground and shattering. The next day, the local builder seems confused. He just fixed a similar problem a week ago at another house, and another the week before that. He'll patch this crack just like he did before and repair the roof, but as he does so, he can't help but think he'll be at another house with the same problem soon. Old people are like this sometimes, though, breaking things on purpose to get someone to come visit them. Oh well, as long as the money is right, he'll keep doing the repairs. That evening, the old woman is in bed when she's woken up by something falling onto her face. A crack is opened in the ceiling right above her bed, and plaster is falling on her. What is happening to this house? She would have to call the builder again in the morning and let him know that it was getting worse. She gets up to clean the plaster dust off her face, but stops halfway to the door. Was that a noise she heard? It sounded like it was coming from downstairs. Another noise. She definitely heard something. Is someone in her home? "Hello?" she cries out. "Whoever you are, you better go. My husband is going to be home any moment, and he won't be happy." The noises seem to have stopped. Maybe she was imagining things. Who would rob a poor old woman, after all? She didn't have anything worth taking. She still needs to wash the plaster off her face, though. She listens for a moment, and when she doesn't hear anything else, she opens the bedroom door and screams. The next day, a child stands in front of the house with a look of shock. Was there an earthquake? How could a house end up like this? They ring the doorbell, but there's no answer. They knock on the door and are surprised to find that the door is open. "Grandma?" the child cries into the quiet house. No response. The child enters and looks around. The house is a mess. Chunks of plaster have fallen off the walls and ceiling. Shelves have fallen over, spilling their contents. And there's broken glass from shattered light bulbs everywhere. The boy looks up the stairs and can see that his grandmother's bedroom door is open and the light is on. "Grandma, are you up there?" Still no response. The child nervously starts up the stairs, gripping the railing tight. They quietly make their way to the bedroom and step into the sliver of light coming from the cracked door. The child pushes the door open to find their grandmother on the floor. Only, it isn't their grandmother. Whatever this is looks like their grandmother, but like she has been stretched and twisted, her body bent at angles where no joints exist. The child is paralyzed with fear, unable to do anything but stare. But the nightmare isn't over yet, because their grandmother is still alive. Sadly, reports like these are all too common in this small town that is plagued by attacks from SCP-783, also known as the Crooked Man. SCP-783 is an extremely dangerous anomalous creature that is currently plaguing the population of Tembe, a small rural village in Oxfordshire, England. Every 12 years during the fall and winter months, SCP-783 will engage in a period of hostile behavior that lasts for roughly 70 days, during which time it will target and attack people who are indoors and alone after sunset. Those targeted by SCP-783 will find that the building they are in rapidly deteriorates, causing damage and creating structural integrity issues. These often appear as cracks on the outside of the building that lead to the buildings taking on a crooked appearance. Unfortunately, while the SCP Foundation is aware of both the location and the periods within which SCP-783 operates, it has so far been unable to prevent any attacks. Additionally, the Foundation has yet to be able to produce either an image or even a physical description of SCP-783 due to the effect it has on recording equipment. Cameras set up to capture the anomaly produce only distorted or corrupted footage, leaving its appearance a mystery. Victims targeted by SCP-783 meet a fate that is, in many ways, worse than death. Their bodies will experience extreme deformations, as their bones suffer dozens of fractures and are stretched and twisted in various unnatural directions. They are then healed by the rapid generation of cartilage and the growth of extra skin to cover the new elongated limbs, leaving the victims a malformed knot of gnarled extremities. Some of the cases are quite severe, with one victim having just their forearm extended to over 2.4 meters, and another who was left stretched to 12.5 meters in height. Despite the gruesome injuries suffered, the majority of victims are still alive following the attacks, though they will more often than not be left completely paralyzed, in a persistent vegetative state, or both. 27 victims of SCP-783 are currently being held in a long-term care facility within a wing of a local hospital that was requisitioned by the Foundation specifically for the care and treatment of 783 victims. Like many of the anomalies that the SCP Foundation investigates and contains, many of the residents of Tembe appear to have some awareness of the Crooked Man, and the anomaly has become something of a local boogeyman. Researchers have even documented local school children singing a nursery rhyme that appears connected and may even explain the origins of the creature. It goes, "There lived a crooked man who made a crooked deal. He kept a crooked cane and his catch in crooked creel. He stole a crooked child who cried a crooked squeal, and that crooked little man was broken on the wheel." A month before a recent SCP-783 period of activity was to begin, a Class D personnel, D-209, was sent to live in a Foundation-owned home in the village. Audio and video recording equipment was set up throughout the house in case the D-Class was targeted, in the hopes that some information could be gleaned should something take place. 43 days after he began living in the house, something finally did. One evening while in bed reading a book, D-209 heard noises on the ground floor of the home. Cameras on the first floor experienced corruption and showed only a distortion moving through the house. When D-209 attempted to leave the bedroom and escape the home, they immediately encountered SCP-783. During a period of time that lasted roughly 5 hours, their bones were broken numerous times and reset over and over, leaving D-209 a twisted mass of flesh and bone. Strangely, at the exact same time that D-209 was being attacked, all 27 of the living prior SCP-783 victims in the hospital experienced violent seizures, despite most of them having been declared functionally brain dead and the rest being totally paralyzed. Also concurrent with the attack was a seismic event on the outskirts of town, and the details revealed by this event were both illuminating and extremely disturbing. Foundation personnel were dispatched to the site of the seismic activity to investigate and determine if it was connected to SCP-783 in any way. There, they found a small group of angry townspeople, perhaps frustrated by seemingly unending paranormal events in their town and the lack of progress that had been made to stop them. After a tense standoff, SCP Agent Collins fired her service weapon into the air, and the crowd quickly scattered. Now, free of distraction, the agents could begin their investigation in earnest. They immediately spotted several objects sticking out of the earth. Upon closer inspection, these were identified as elongated human toes. A dig team was sent to the site, and by the next day, a mass grave had been uncovered that was filled with a twisted mass of what appeared to be victims of SCP-783. Their mutated and drawn-out bodies were well preserved despite being buried directly in the ground, and had all been buried head down, with their arms extending deeper into the burial pit. As one researcher was attempting to take a tissue sample from one of the bodies, the ground beneath him gave way and he fell into the pit. He landed on the tangled mass of limbs which shifted under his weight, and he disappeared into the pit beneath them. Agent Collins immediately found a length of rope, tied it to her waist, and climbed into the pit with instructions to the on-site team to pull her back up when she signaled. Agent Collins descended into the pit beneath the bodies, and after several minutes, she was extracted, though without the missing researcher. At debriefing, she described how she found an anomalous location under the ground beneath 783's victims' corpses, and she was so rattled by what she saw that she was granted a temporary leave of absence. The Foundation had to know more, and a D-Class personnel was quickly selected for exploration of the underground anomaly. D-2172 was equipped with audio and video recording equipment, along with several scientific measurement tools, as well as a firearm, and was lowered down into the pit via crane. Their wired tether to the surface would both send the information they collected back, as well as serve as their lifeline to the surface. As D-2172 was lowered past the mass of corpses into the darkness, they experienced a sense of vertigo, before it was realized that the anomalous effects extended to gravity as well, which had become reversed, and that they would need to start climbing up in order to descend further into the pit. They soon climbed out of the hole surrounded by the reaching, extended arms of corpses, and emerged into an open world with an overcast sky. It looked exactly like the town of Tembe, with the same buildings present there as in our world. The world appeared to be uninhabited, though, with no sign of the missing SCP Foundation researcher. D2172 began investigating the buildings and found them all to be empty as well, though they did unfortunately find signs of a struggle in one house, with what looked to be evidence of the missing researcher's demise. They continued exploring the area and found that the anomalous properties of the location extended to its borders too. And as the D-Class walked north out of the town, after several kilometers, they found that they were now somehow back at the southern edge of the town. D2172 was ordered to return to the entry point, but as they walked, they were suddenly impeded by the deformed body of an SCP-783 victim that stretched across the road in front of them. D2172 drew and fired their weapon at the entity, but it didn't react, and they were forced to retreat into the nearby woods. After several minutes, they stopped to rest when they spotted something else. In the distance, the D-Class saw what looked to be a giant white birch tree, and it was coming towards them. As the living tree approached, it became clear that it wasn't a tree at all. What looked like branches were extended bony fingers that it was using to walk. The long branch-like fingers were coming out of the top of the tree, where D2172 could see their origin. These branches were the elongated fingers of the missing SCP Foundation researcher. D2172 turned to run as the giant living tree chased them back into the town, firing their weapon at the creature whenever they had the chance, but was unable to stop it. The visual feed was soon lost as the audio continued to broadcast the screams of D2172. But this wasn't the end of the expedition. The on-site team was surprised to witness after several hours that the tether was pulled on twice, the signal that it should be reeled in. A medical team was sent to the site since it was assumed that D2172 would need immediate care, and the team began reeling in the line. After several minutes, they spotted the harness that should have been strapped to D2172, but with nothing in it. They continued to pull, but the harness became stuck on the mass of corpses in the pit. They then noticed that it wasn't actually stuck. There was a hand holding onto the harness for dear life. It was D2172's hand. The team kept pulling as D2172's arm kept stretching out of the pit to a length of over 3 meters. But eventually, the resistance became too much. D2172 lost its grip, and it was seen sinking back into the mass of corpses inside the pit. Following this expedition, it was determined that only special operations teams and mobile task forces would be used to explore the dangerous anomalous location in the future. At least 3 such expeditions have been undertaken, though the details remain classified for the time being, and perhaps it is for the best if they remain so. The SCP Foundation will continue to monitor the town of Tembe in an attempt to learn more about SCP-783 and hopefully discover a means to contain it and its related phenomena. Due to the difficulty in containing the anomaly, it has been classified as Keter, and a local building adjacent to the Tembe Hospital has been requisitioned and designated as Provisional Site 5 in order to accommodate the increased Foundation presence. As the SCP Foundation continues to research this mysterious and highly dangerous anomaly, any victims of SCP-783 are to be retrieved, their injuries catalogued, and then their bodies are to be incinerated.
Another day, another disastrous pitch meeting. The animator lets out a heavy sigh as he unlocks the door to his house, all but tossing his bag to the ground when he enters the living room. He takes off his coat and leaves it where it fell, kicks off his shoes, and doesn't stop moving until he enters his bedroom. With all of the frustrated energy he has accumulated throughout this extremely tiresome day, he throws himself onto his bed with a groan. He grabs the closest pillow, shoves his face into it, and lets out a long, loud scream of disappointment. The day started off promising enough, with a meeting he was lucky to get. But as soon as the producer started checking his phone 5 minutes in, he knew the whole pursuit was doomed. He prepped meticulously, concept art, a binder full of episode pitches, and a flashy presentation to really showcase the, well, show. But after all that work, the producer, who barely gave him a single look the entire time, said that no one is looking to buy original shows right now. Remakes and existing intellectual property are really what the market is suited for at the moment. So he was sent back home with nothing but wounded pride and wasted time to show for all that hard work. If it was the only one this month, he might not feel so despondent. But the fact is, this was only the latest in a long series of letdowns. Even with previous successes under his belt and a stint on a successful show, no one is buying what he's selling. So what now? What's next?
Tear the whole thing up and start over again? Order a pizza and stay in bed all weekend? Maybe he should go for a walk and clear his head. No, none of that sounds quite right. There's only one thing to do when his mood gets this bad. Sit down at the drafting table and get back to drawing. It's the only way to clear his head, leave it all on the page, and get a clean start tomorrow. Whatever else happens, he's always got his art, even if no one's buying it right now. He drags himself out of bed, orders that pizza for later, and slumps into his seat, waiting for inspiration to strike. He caps and uncaps his pen over and over again, but nothing comes to mind. With a heavy sigh, he draws a circle. That's something at least. Could be a head, maybe. He adds a line stretching down to form a body. 2 more strokes of the pen to make arms, and 2 longer strokes to make a pair of legs. There, a little faceless stick man. He scribbles a quick pair of eyes, but stops short of a mouth. He feels so voiceless right now, shouting into an industry determined to keep its ears plugged. Maybe this little stick figure is like him in that way. If the stick figure is him, then it's probably just as plagued with doubts as he is. So why not draw those doubts too? He grabs a black pen, scribbling in swathes of darkness all throughout the background. Some of them naturally take shape as he goes. A swarm of ravens delivering portents of doom, black cats weaving between the stick figure's legs. Some of the shapes are just black blobs with glowering red eyes. Others are phantom-like wisps. In the very back, looming over all of it, the animator sketches out a hulking reptilian figure, jaws open wide to expose its sharp, eager teeth. As he sits back and takes a look at his handiwork, the animator feels a pang of guilt over depriving the little stick man of self-expression. As one more touch, he adds a speech bubble next to the stick figure's head and scrawls the words, "Get me out of here." Just then, the doorbell rings. Oh, pizza's here. As his mind turns from artistic pursuits to the hungry growl in his stomach, he abandons the stick figure and all of his shadowy tormentors. He can always come back to it later. For now, he feels a sense of relief. The dark clouds have cleared from his mind, transferred onto the page. Next time he sits down, he'll be able to come up with something great. He just knows it. But for now, pizza and a bit of trashy reality television. After demolishing half of the pizza and a few episodes of some new wilderness survival competition show he's already forgotten the name of, the animator changes into his pajamas, brushes his teeth, and collapses back into bed. Everything will feel better in the morning. It always does. Or at least, it does most of the time. After a moment, he sinks into a deep, dreamless sleep. But rather than waking up to the chiming of his alarm clock, the animator wakes after only a few hours to the unmistakable feeling of being watched. He forces his heavy eyelids open, scanning the room as his heart races with the dread he can't put into words. There's no one in here. Nothing unusual except... Is that his stick figure drawing? It's leaning against the wall now. He left it flat on the table, right? As he squints at it in the darkness, he notices something strange. He can see the stick figure, but not the shadowy figures around it. The speech bubble is gone too. Wait, there's no paper? It's just his stick figure, standing, against the wall, as if it had been peeled off of the page and stuck there. Worrying it could be some kind of sleep paralysis, the man wiggles his toes and clenches his fists. He can move just fine, he's definitely awake. So, what's happening here? He's about to give up and try to go back to sleep, when the stick figure takes a step toward him, then another. As the animator watches in wide-eyed disbelief, the stick figure walks across the desk, coming to a stop at the very edge. The man flicks his lamp on, blinking as his eyes adjust to the sudden light. There's no denying it. The stick figure is standing there, staring at him with its wide, hand-drawn eyes. Suddenly, words appear next to the figure, identical in handwriting and color to the words he wrote in the speech bubble. "Hello, where am I?" The man blinks for a moment, trying to process it. After a moment, he answers, "You're in my room." "Why?" "Honestly, I don't really know." He shakes his head, rubbing at his eyes. When he opens them, there's new text waiting for him. "Where did I come from? Do you know? Is this really happening? This all feels completely insane." But those eyes are staring at him expectantly, and he feels like he needs to answer. I drew you on that paper back there. You created me? Are you God?"
The animator bursts out laughing at this. It's all just too absurd, too insane. I'm definitely not God. I don't know what I am. Listen, I'm exhausted. I'm gonna try to get some sleep. Oh, okay. Please don't let me stop you. I'll be here, I think. I don't really know how this all works. Yeah. Good night. The animator switches off the lamp, rolls over, and after a bit of a struggle, manages to fall asleep again. Maybe this was all some really lucid dream, and when he wakes up in the morning, the stick figure will be back on the page where it belongs. The screech of the alarm jolts him from his slumber, and he reaches out to hit the snooze button. As he opens his eyes, he takes in the sight of the room, bathed in the fresh light of day. The previous night was bizarre, but it's all over now. Everything is back to normal. Wait. No, the stick figure is gone from the desk, but it isn't on the page either. In fact, the entire piece of paper, which once held yesterday's drawings, is blank. If it isn't here, then where the hell is it? He rushes downstairs, scanning the entire house for the sight of the stick figure. He spots it, standing on the kitchen counter, looking intently at the magnets on the refrigerator. When it sees him, it begins to speak again. Well, to manifest words next to its head. Oh, there you are. I'm so glad you're back. I have so many questions. What am I? Why am I here? Oh, and what are these horrible voices? They keep saying the most terrifying things to me. The stick figure never gets an answer, as the shock of the encounter makes the animator's knees collapse. He slumps to the floor, completely overwhelmed. When he comes back to his senses, he makes a call to a local psychiatrist. Whatever's gone wrong with his brain, he's intent on fixing it. What this poor, troubled animator doesn't realize is that he is perfectly sane. He's just sharing his home with SCP-3052. SCP-3052 is a designation given to two separate entities, SCP-3052-1 and SCP-3052-2. SCP-3052-1 is a humanoid entity that best resembles a hand-drawn, and somewhat poorly drawn at that, copper-colored stick figure. There are two circular holes drawn in the entity's head, which appear to function as its eyes. Though SCP-3052-1 is believed to be two-dimensional, anyone facing the entity seems to perceive it as facing them directly, regardless of the angle or direction it is viewed from. Due to this effect, the exact dimensions of the entity have not yet been determined. The entity has been X-rayed, allowing for a better understanding of its physiology, and it has been found to lack both a skeletal structure and any organs. After this revelation, some samples were taken from SCP-3052-1's body and analyzed. These samples were found to consist of a mixture of spray paint, acrylic paint, and, strangely enough, human blood. Though SCP-3052-1 has no visible hands, its arms ending in flat pencil strokes like most stick figures do, it has proven itself capable of picking up, holding, and moving objects as if it did have hands. The figure has not shown or expressed a need for food or water. Even if it did, it is uncertain where that food or water would go, as the figure has no mouth that can be seen. As the lack of mouth might imply, the entity is not capable of speech or any other vocalizations. However, it is able to effectively communicate via words that manifest visually near its head and linger there for approximately 7 to 10 seconds at a time. These words are made up of the same substances as SCP-3052-1's body, and like the entity's body, they will face a viewer directly, no matter what angle they are viewed from. SCP-3052-1 is sparing in its communication, but has displayed a large vocabulary and intelligence on par with an average human adult. During its communications, the entity expressed that it was struggling with mental illnesses, including depression, anxiety, and mild schizophrenia. An initial intake session with the on-site psychologist confirmed these self-diagnoses and kickstarted SCP-3052-1's weekly therapy sessions. The anomalous effects of SCP-3052-1 extend beyond the obvious. It is a living stick figure, yes, but there is more to the story than that. Whenever the entity is photographed or recorded on video, additional subjects can be seen in the resulting photo or video footage. These subjects, which cannot be seen in person with the naked eye, are designated SCP-3052-2. These instances are black entities with vivid red eyes, composed in a similar hand-drawn manner to SCP-3052-1. The entities are often shapeless, appearing like a blob or shadow with red eyes, but they do occasionally take on the shapes of various animals, such as crows, cats, and a large unidentified reptile. These instances communicate in the same manner as SCP-3052-1, though their letters are black as opposed to copper. These instances do not attempt to communicate with anyone other than SCP-3052-1, and the communications are not exactly friendly. SCP-3052-2 has a habit of harassing, threatening, and otherwise verbally abusing SCP-3052-1. It tends to claim that the Foundation is planning to terminate SCP-3052-1, though there are, as far as I can tell, no Foundation plans for its termination. SCP-3052-1 rarely responds aside from a nod, but will occasionally voice agreement with SCP-3052-2. The SCP Foundation first discovered SCP-3052-1 on June 19th of a redacted year, when it was living in the home of an anonymous digital animator. The animator, thought to be the creator of SCP-3052-1, was found in his bedroom, where he had perished due to complications from his antipsychotic medication. Oddly enough, blood samples from the deceased animator did not match the blood found in the samples of SCP-3052-1's body. The origin of that blood is still unknown, and no DNA matches have been found so far. Due to its regular cooperation and compliance with the Foundation and its research, SCP-3052-1 has been given the ability to request items and amenities to boost its morale. All of the requests have been officially logged in its file. First, the entity asked for a blank journal and a pen, which it was given. Since then, the entity journals every day and shares its entries with the psychologist during their sessions. Next, it requested a television, a DVD player, and a selection of various DVDs. Most of these were animated comedies, though a wide variety of other genres were also represented. Wanting to spruce up its containment chamber, the entity requested a potted houseplant next. The request was granted, but there was an oversight. The entity had no way to water the plant. The plant quickly expired, plunging SCP-3052-1 into a guilt-ridden depressive episode. As a therapeutic measure, the entity was given a new houseplant and a watering can. This time, it was able to keep the plant alive, vastly improving its mood. So far, SCP-3052-1 has not requested anything else, but the ability to do so is still on the table. All of SCP-3052-1's conversations with its psychologist are taped, but most of the footage is kept private. Doctor-patient confidentiality still applies to living stick figures, as it turns out. There is one excerpt from a session that has been archived in the official file, however, which can offer a window into the entity's usual therapeutic process. The psychologist's identity has been redacted from the file, so for our purposes, I will simply refer to them as Dr. X. Dr. X began the session with a standard greeting. "How are you today?" SCP-3052-1 shrugged. "Kind of tired." Dr. X made a note of this, then continued. "Have you been having trouble sleeping?" SCP-3052-1 nodded. "I keep having the dreams." Dr. X made another note. "Yes, you've told me about them. Have you written them down as I advised?" SCP-3052-1 shook its head. "I keep forgetting, sorry." Dr. X's expression was sympathetic, their tone of voice calm. "There's no need to apologize, it's completely optional. Still, it might help. Do you still hear the voices?" "All the time." "Do they sound like anyone you know?" Dr. X asked. Again, SCP-3052-1 shrugged. "I don't know a lot of people." "What sort of things do they say?" There was a long pause, during which SCP-3052-1 did not respond. Dr. X filled the silence. "If you don't feel comfortable discussing it, that's..." SCP-3052-1 cut them off, saying, "They say you're going to kill me." "Who is going to kill you?" "I'm not sure. Whoever works here, I guess." Dr. X made several notes, then spoke again. "Do you believe we're going to kill you?" There was another long pause. Then the response appeared next to SCP-3052-1's head. "I don't know." "Do you feel like you're in danger staying here?" "Sometimes." "I see. Have you been experiencing any visual hallucinations?" "Like seeing things?" "Precisely." SCP-3052-1 shook its head. "Not really, no." "Nothing unusual or strange?" "I don't think so." "I see." Dr. X made one more note. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss? After a moment, SCP-3052-1 said, "My watering can's almost empty." Dr. X nodded. "I'll let someone know." Following this session, Dr. X concluded that SCP-3052-1 is likely unable to see instances of SCP-3052-2 and perceives them as disembodied voices. If you are concerned about the watering can and the well-being of the plant, the can was refilled after the session. A little while later, SCP-3052-1 was seen watering the plant, which is currently thriving. There is one more addendum to the official file for SCP-3052 that I found to be notable. It is a transcript of a video that captured a conversation between SCP-3052-1 and SCP-3052-2. SCP-3052-1 was sitting at its desk in its containment chamber, staring at the wall of its cell. After about 45 seconds of inactivity, an instance of SCP-3052-2, in the shape of an unidentified large reptile, skulked into frame from the left. It stopped about 15 centimeters away from SCP-3052-1, who did not turn to look at it. It did, however, acknowledge its presence when the reptile began to speak. Just as the stick figure had described in its therapy session, the reptile warned of impending doom. "They're going to kill you, you know." The figure responded simply, "I know." "What are you going to do about it?" "I don't know." "You might as well just let them. You'd be doing the world an enormous favor." SCP-3052-1 shrugged. "Yeah, probably." When SCP-3052-2 spoke again, the words appeared in rapid succession, as if the reptile was delivering an impassioned speech. "It's your fault that you're in here. If you had just kept your mouth shut and not asked him any damn questions, this wouldn't be happening. Where am I? What are these voices? Are you God? There is no God, idiot. He's dead, remember? He's dead and you killed him. Just like that. All because you opened your stupid mouth. Now you're going to hell, and it's all your fault." After this, the entity sat in silence for about 20 seconds. After a moment, SCP-3052-2 broke the silence. "I'm going away now. I can't stand looking at you." Then SCP-3052-2 slowly moved out of frame, leaving the stick figure alone with its thoughts. SCP-3052-1 is currently kept in a standard humanoid containment chamber. The entity's containment is monitored constantly via video surveillance, which is manned by staff with Level 2 clearance or higher. SCP-3052-1 is granted one session per week with the on-site psychologist for the sake of maintaining its mental health. These sessions are also monitored via video surveillance by Level 2 staff or higher. Should the entity make any official requests, these must be directed to and approved by a staff member of Level 4 or higher. Speaking of requests, there have been proposals by members of the research team requesting experiments that would involve showing SCP-3052-1 recordings of SCP-3052-2 instances. These requests are currently pending approval. When SCP-3052-1 was caught on video being tormented by SCP-3052-2, the reptile spoke to the stick figure of God. I may be out of line here, this is just a hypothesis, but I believe it was possibly referring to that deceased animator, the one found in the same house where SCP-3052-1 was first discovered. If he did, in fact, create SCP-3052-1, and by extension, SCP-3052-2, then it would only make sense for his creations to view him as their god. Perhaps the appearance of SCP-3052-1 took a toll on the man's sanity, driving him to the edge until it cost him his life. Perhaps SCP-3052-2 is not a separate entity at all, but rather the manifestation of SCP-3052-1's guilty conscience. If that is the case, then it is entirely possible that continued therapy sessions will eradicate SCP-3052-2 altogether. Of course, I could be wrong. It's happened before. But the idea that SCP-3052-1 could eventually find some peace, a sense of safety and freedom from the guilt that follows it like a shadow is an enticingly comforting one. After all, if even a two-dimensional living stick figure can heal from its trauma, cast off the yoke of shame and fear around its neck, and live a happier life, maybe there's hope for us all with our three-dimensional troubles. Or maybe not. But isn't it a nice thought just the same?
You open your eyes, only to find something blocking your vision. Are those
Teeth? Human teeth? Growing out of your eyes? Oh no. Oh God, no. Taking the subway can be a real hit-or-miss experience. On one hand, it's cheaper than driving, especially with gas prices these days. It's convenient, eco-friendly, and removes any potential stress about where to park. But it can also be hot, poorly maintained, and worst of all, it's filled with the public. These are the thoughts running through the woman's head as she stands on the subway on the way home from work. She holds onto a nearby pole for balance, struggling to maintain a bubble of personal space as a steady stream of new passengers climb on at each stop. She can feel her chest tightening with anxiety, and she takes a deep breath to loosen the stress. Just a couple more stops to go, and then she can get out of here and retreat to the comfort of her apartment. The train car slows down, and the doors open for the penultimate stop. Great! After this one, she'll be home free. Of course, more people climb on. Everybody has places to go, she reminds herself. It's fine. But as one pale, jumpy-looking man crowds a little bit too close to the pole she's holding, she feels her anxiety levels spike again. Why won't he just respect her personal space? Come on, buddy. It's a crowded train, but there's enough room to take a step back. She's working up the nerve to say something when the train jerks suddenly, starting back up. The sharp motion sends the man rocking forward, and he bumps into her, hard. She feels a sudden sharp pain in her hand and looks down to see a speck of blood. Seriously? She swears at the strange man, unable to help herself. He glances down, and his eyes widen. He apologizes profusely and backs away from her, unmistakable terror in his eyes. A bit of an overreaction, she thinks. She just yelled a bit. It isn't as if she was going to hurt him. But he pushes through the crowd, moving away from her, and she doesn't care to follow. The train slows, and the doors slide open again. Thank goodness, her stop. She shoves her way out of the train car as fast as she can, and doesn't slow down until she's unlocking the door to her apartment. Time to tend to the weirdest injury she's ever gotten. She disinfects the wound on her hand and begins to apply a bandage. Now that she's slowed down, she can get a better look at it. She had assumed the guy's keys had poked her or something, but now, examining it more carefully, it looks kind of like a bite? Did he have some kind of animal up his sleeve or something? It all happened so fast she couldn't really tell. Better to be safe than sorry. She'll go get a rabies vaccine tomorrow. With that plan in place and a bandage applied to her hand, she quickly forgets about the hellish subway ride, the nervous man, and the strange bite. The next day, she gets her rabies shot and puts the whole bizarre encounter out of her mind for good. And it stays there, out of sight and out of mind. Until about a week later, when her gums begin to ache. It starts with a twinge, a bit of discomfort one morning that wakes her up before her alarm. But as the day goes on, the ache grows more and more difficult to ignore. She finds herself chewing on her pen during meetings, alleviating the itching, painful feeling in her gums with the pressure of it. A few days later, it's all she can think about. She half considers picking up one of those hard plastic rings for teething babies. At that point, she realizes it's time to go to the dentist. They'll know what to do. But when the dentist leans her back in that adjustable chair and peers into her mouth, he is just as clueless as she is, perhaps even more so. She's presenting symptoms of a condition known as hyperdontia, he explains. She is, at the age of 30 years old, growing new teeth. Not wisdom teeth that are coming in, but a whole new row of teeth just behind the ones she already has. He advises her to come back in once the teeth have grown in all the way, and they can discuss next steps then. She calls in sick to work the next day. She lies and tells them it's the flu. How could she explain the truth? But at least there's a solution in sight. The dentist will help her figure out what to do next. And surely this will be the worst of it, right? Unfortunately, she couldn't be more wrong. When she wakes up the next day, she notices some difficulty breathing through her nose, accompanied by a feeling of discomfort in her nostrils. Oh great, is she actually sick now? She goes to blow her nose, but nothing comes out. She rubs at her nostrils and is startled by a sudden sharp pain and the sensation of something solid in there. What the hell is going on? She rushes to the bathroom mirror, tilting her head back to get a better look. When she can make out what is blocking her nostrils, her jaw drops. Teeth. They're smaller than the ones in her mouth and somewhat obscured, but there's no doubt about it. Little rows of teeth have erupted inside of her nose.
She calls her dentist and schedules an immediate appointment. She struggles to explain on the phone, but no matter what words she chooses, she knows the doctor won't truly understand until he sees her condition with his own eyes. And when he does see it, he can't stop himself from crying out in shock. This is no ordinary case of hyperdontia. This is something else entirely, something that should be medically impossible. Seeing the appearance of teeth inside of the woman's nose, the dentist decides to perform a thorough examination of the rest of her face and head. Much to his and her horror, he finds small teeth beginning to erupt in her ear canals too. He warns that if they are not removed, they could cause permanent damage to her hearing. There's no doubt about it. For the sake of her well-being, the dentist must perform the strangest extractions of his career. The woman is given an anesthetic, and he gets to work. By the time he is finished, the dentist has pulled 36 teeth of varying sizes and shapes from her mouth, nose, and ears. It was a harrowing affair, but at least it's over. He prescribes pain medication, an antibiotic, and some time off of work, and advises the woman to give him a call if she experiences anything like this again. Neither of them will say it aloud, but they're both privately terrified that she'll have to come back in and do it all over again. For the next few weeks, the woman feels like she's back to normal. She's a bit shaken up by the experience, a bit exhausted, but otherwise it all seems to be resolved. Then the aches start up again, not just in her gums this time, but in her ears, in her nose, and more terrifying of all, in new places too. She can feel them, the germs of new teeth growing under the surface in between her fingers and her toes, even in her eyelids. The feeling was unpleasant and distracting before, but now it is absolute agony. She can barely dial the telephone to contact her dentist, but she manages to call him and drag herself down to the office. At first, he doesn't want to believe it, but then he performs an X-ray. The images that come back turn his stomach, and he nearly vomits onto the floor. He can see them clear as day. Teeth, 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 growing everywhere the woman feels that unique ache, the building pressure of something struggling to grow, ready to burst through the skin and be born. More teeth in her mouth and teeth in her eyes, her ears, all over her body. Even if he extracts every tooth again, even if he plucks out each new growth, there will be more waiting to replace them. Unsure of what else to recommend, he advises the woman to check herself into the hospital. Whatever her affliction is, it has progressed beyond his capabilities. Weeks later, the woman is lying in her hospital bed, weak, exhausted, barely able to move. Her skin is dotted with teeth. Her doctors tried to perform surgery to remove some of the teeth before they could erupt, but the incisions became tiny mouths filled with even more teeth. Now, they've all but given up. She can barely open her eyes to get a look at the strange figures that enter her hospital room, promising to help get to the bottom of her condition. They're scientists, they say, and they specialize in unusual conditions like hers. This poor, unfortunate woman is considered the first recorded patient to be infected with SCP-2450. SCP-2450 is an infectious disease, the most notable symptom of which is the manifestation of severe hyperdontia in unusual parts of the body. The initial source of the infection has been traced to the location now known as Building 2450, a former men's bathroom and a company service station off of a major motorway in the United Kingdom. It is unknown exactly how the infection is transmitted, but Level 5 HAZ suits have been ineffective at containing and preventing the infection. The disease can affect a wide variety of mammalian species, including but not limited to rodents, dogs, and humans. Approximately 23% of mammals exposed to the initial infection source area will contract SCP-2450. Infection can also be passed through a bite, provided the bite is deep enough to draw blood. Infections from bites occur at a rate of approximately 12%. The initial stage of infection is characterized by the presentation of hyperdontia in various orifices of the body. I am sorry to say that is exactly what it sounds like, the eruption of extra teeth in places where no teeth should be. This generally begins in the mouth, as extra teeth sprout from the gums, the roof of the mouth, and the frenulum beneath the tongue. However, as the disease progresses, any bodily opening can become fair game, including the nostrils, the eye sockets, and other, even less comfortable locations. The size of the teeth varies depending on the size of the opening and tends to be proportional to the space available. Teeth produced as a result of SCP-2450 infection grow at a rate approximately 12 times that of ordinary teeth, and can grow from gem to full root completion over the course of a period between 3 weeks and 9 months, depending on size. As the infection progresses, more and more rows of teeth will grow further and further back into the affected orifice. Once all natural bodily orifices have grown at least one full row of teeth, the infection will progress into its next stage. At this stage, parts of the body that form a semi-closed space, such as the spaces between the toes or the armpits, will begin to erupt teeth. If that wasn't horrible enough, any apertures formed on the body via external trauma, such as cuts on the skin, will become growth sites for SCP-2450 teeth. Did you just feel a shiver run down your spine? Me too. My own spine, not your spine, you understand. Back to the matter at hand, which I'm so sorry to tell you does in fact get worse. You see, as the infection progresses and more teeth are growing, the calcium and other minerals required to grow these teeth have to come from somewhere. These minerals will be leached from the body's natural stores, and the process can frequently result in osteoporosis and hypocalcemia. Administering calcium and other mineral supplements to SCP-2450 patients will keep them alive, and they will continue to produce teeth indefinitely if this is the case. You might be wondering if the process of growing all of these teeth is especially painful. Allow me to provide absolutely no reassurance. It is. It has been described as extremely painful and similar to the teething pains experienced by young children as their regular teeth develop and grow in. Much like teething infants, patients will experience a strong desire to address this pain by biting or grinding the affected teeth. However, as the infection progresses, the teeth will begin to erupt in areas that are incapable of biting. In these cases, patients will often grind the teeth against solid objects such as the corners of walls. This activity has been highly discouraged, as it could result in cuts and lacerations that may provide a breeding ground for even more teeth, resulting in a truly vicious cycle. Incidentally, this behavior led to the first recorded instance of SCP-2450 infection via tooth-to-blood contact. SCP-2450 was first discovered by the Foundation during a routine search of medical literature, and on February 19, 2009, the Foundation classified it as an anomalous phenomenon sufficiently distinct from hyperdontia. At that point, standard information suppression policy was applied successfully, and the pattern of outbreaks was then used to trace the source to the aforementioned service station. At that point, a series of quarantines and experimentation revealed that the men's restroom in Wing B was the specific point of origin. As far as the Foundation has been able to determine, there is nothing anomalous about the service station or that particular bathroom, aside from the SCP-2450 infections themselves. The station was first built in 1983 and operated normally for decades. So when and how did everything change? By interviewing cleaning and security staff and reviewing years of security footage, the SCP Foundation was able to tentatively pinpoint the date of origin for SCP-2450 to July 15, 2008. On that day, the following events were captured by security cameras located in the building. First, 3 men in black hooded sweatshirts entered the building, their hoods pulled up to obscure their faces. One of the men carried a large, seemingly empty backpack. Another held an unidentified green implement. The third man had nothing in his hands. Shortly after entering the building, the men stopped outside of the Wing B men's bathroom and spoke amongst themselves. No audio was recorded, and their lips could not be seen, so there is no way of knowing exactly what was said. But whatever it was, the men entered the bathroom a few moments later. Before shutting the door behind them, the last man examined the area, looking to see if they were being followed. Seeing that they were alone, he closed the door, and the 3 of them disappeared. They were inside the bathroom for the next 2.5 hours. Whatever happened in that bathroom is still unknown, as security cameras inside of restrooms are generally frowned upon and tend not to be installed. After those 2.5 hours were up, 2 out of the 3 men exited the bathroom, the man with the backpack and the man who was carrying the green object. The third man was not with them. The backpack now appeared to be full, and a great deal heavier than it was on the way in. The 2 men walked to the main entrance of the building, at which point the one without the backpack stopped and reached into the top pocket of his hooded sweatshirt. He then patted the pockets of his trousers. Whatever he was looking for was not there. He turned to head back into the building, but the other man placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. The two argued for a moment before leaving the building and getting into a car. Later analysis of the license plate revealed it to be a stolen vehicle. They drove off toward the south and out of sight. Subsequent attempts to track the men down have so far been unsuccessful. The cleaner on duty that day later reported that one of the bathroom stalls was locked for an unusually long time. When he came back and was able to enter and clean the stall, he spotted a large amount of what appeared to be white gravel on the floor and the lid of the toilet. This is now believed to be dental matter. Speaking of unidentified objects, the green implement from the security tapes was later discovered and identified. It is now referred to as SCP-2450-1 and is stored in Reliquary 87B-6, Locker 12004. SCP-2450-1 is a green plastic toothbrush of unknown make or manufacturer. As you might have guessed, it is no ordinary toothbrush. When a tooth is brushed with SCP-2450-1, the teeth will be worn down to the root at a rapid pace. An entire molar, including the root, can be removed with the brush in 5 minutes. In spite of this, it appears to do no damage to any other surrounding tissue such as the skin or gums. On the back of the handle, the text, "For non-oral use only," is printed. The origins of this toothbrush and the motivations for the men that entered the bathroom stall that day are still unknown. However, given the information that we do have, I feel I can make an educated guess. It is my personal theory that the third man, the one who had never been found, was suffering from an advanced form of the SCP-2450 infection. When the men attempted to treat his condition with the anomalous toothbrush, he had advanced to such a severe state that his body was primarily made up of teeth, and he crumbled apart during the process. His remains were then stuffed into the backpack and taken out of the building. The debris left behind somehow infected the area, leading to the subsequent SCP-2450 infections that have occurred in the area since. I have no way to officially confirm this speculation, of course, but it seems as reasonable of a theory as something can be where anomalous tooth-based diseases and unusually powerful toothbrushes are concerned. Any patients afflicted with SCP-2450 must be kept in Secure War Land 12 and physically restrained in order to contain the infection and prevent any further spread. The initial source of infection is contained at the site of its discovery in Building 2450, which has been disguised as an electrical substation. Building 2450 is kept securely locked and surrounded by a standard substation fence, which has been covered with danger of death warning signs in order to deter any civilians from approaching. The building is kept under constant surveillance, and anyone attempting to enter the premises must be detained and thoroughly questioned. The only method of entering Building 2450 is a double-door system, including an isolation chamber which prevents any small mammals from entering the building. No mammals, with the exception of approved test subjects, may exit the building. One member of Foundation personnel with formal dentistry training must be assigned to monitor all dentistry journals and affiliated news sources for cases that might indicate an outbreak of SCP-2450. If one is detected, swift and decisive action must be taken. There is currently no known cure for SCP-2450. Patients who have been infected with the disease can either be kept alive with mineral supplements and produce teeth indefinitely, or they can slowly lose calcium and vital minerals over time until their body can no longer function. Either way, they will be a prisoner of the teeth until the day that they die, confined to a terrifying, toothy existence. Though those who have already been infected are somewhat doomed, at least until a cure can be found, we can take some comfort in the knowledge that SCP-2450 can be easily avoided. Just stay away from the men's restroom in Building 2450 and try not to let anyone bite you, at least not hard enough to draw blood. Still, the images I saw while looking into SCP-2450 will haunt me for quite some time. In fact, I think I've had my fill of the topic. My gums are beginning to itch, so if you'll excuse me, I think I'll go eat some caramels and forget to floss. Can't let the teeth get too comfortable.
A storm rages outside of the little old house, as inside, a little old woman bounces a little baby on her little old knee. The baby coos and laughs as the old woman makes funny faces and noises for the child, trying to keep it entertained as they wait for his parents to return from their much-needed night out by themselves. The old woman herself needs a rest now, though. He's forgotten how exhausting it can be to watch a child. Okay, that's enough. It's time for both of us to take a little nap before your parents get back. She gets up and takes the baby into a nearby room that looks as though it was a nursery at one time, but it hasn't been used for many years. As she goes to set the child into the crib, a strong gust of wind blows through the room. She places the baby down and rushes to the window and closes it shut. It must have been left cracked open by mistake. Brr, the room is cold from the wind, but she has just the thing to fix that. She moves to a small closet and opens the creaky door. The little old woman strains to reach up to the top shelf and feels around. Ah, there it is. She pulls down a baby blanket, a soft baby blue with colorful animals printed on it. It looks as though it's been up there for a long time, and she gives it a good shake before walking back to the crib. Look what we have here. It's your daddy's own blankie. She gives it another shake. There we go, good as new. She leans into the crib and wraps the small helpless child in the blanket before giving him a gentle kiss on the forehead. Now you get some sleep. Your mommy and daddy will be back before you know it, and we want to show them what a good babysitter Grammy is, don't we? That way I get to see you all the time. The little old woman switches off the light and exits the room, leaving the door cracked just a few inches. She heads back to the couch and plops down on it. Almost as soon as she does, though, the baby starts crying. With a sigh, she gets back up and goes back to the nursery. What's the matter, little dear? She says as she turns the lights on. Oh no, she rushes to the crib. You've kicked your blanket off. You must be freezing. She grabs the blanket from the end of the crib and tucks it around the baby once again. There you go, that's better. The old woman leaves the room and quietly closes the door shut, leaving it open just a few inches. The moment she turns around to go back to the couch, though, the crying starts again. With a sigh, she opens the door and goes back into the room. Once again, the blanket is stuffed at the end of the crib where the baby has kicked it off. Fine, don't want a blanket? That's fine. She picks the baby up out of the crib and rocks him in her arms until it stops crying. She sets him back in the crib. There you go. No blankets, just please get some sleep. Grammy's tired. The old woman takes the blanket out of the crib and leaves the room. She closes the door most of the way and, incredibly, this time the child remains silent. The old woman resumes her place on the couch and starts to yawn. Just as she does, the wind outside picks up and howls loudly. The old woman shivers. She looks next to her and spots the baby blanket. She picks it up and examines the cute animal print, remembering when her own son was a baby wrapped in it. She smiles at the happy thought and throws the blanket around her shoulders. She leans back on the couch and finds that her eyes are growing very heavy. She'll rest them for just a moment. She won't fall asleep. She'll just rest. Mom, it's us. We're back. Thanks again for... The couple both scream when they enter the house to find that the old woman is lying face down on the floor in a pool of blood. The source of the blood is obvious. Chunks of flesh from her shoulders and upper back have been torn out, leaving jagged holes, as if she were mauled by an animal. As the man runs to the old woman, trying to do anything he can to help her, the woman runs to the nursery to find that the baby is sleeping peacefully in his crib. The woman picks up the child, tears streaming down her cheeks, and returns to the living room to see her husband kneeling beside his dead mother. Both the husband and wife are so shocked by what they have found that neither notices the baby blanket lying on the couch, or that the cruel, blood-covered mouth on it is slowly fading from view until it disappears completely. There is little in life that is more comforting than a favorite blanket. Perhaps you've had the same one since you were a child, or you have a heavy one that you like to wrap yourself in when you're feeling down, or maybe it's just one that's especially fluffy and warm that you'd do anything to keep. Today's anomaly plays on those very feelings, using them against its victims to become one of the more insidious predatory anomalies in the SCP Foundation archives. This is SCP-799, also known as the Carnivorous Blanket. SCP-799 is a type of creature that can vary in shape, size, and appearance, but, as the name implies, always takes the form of a blanket of some kind. The exact material the anomaly is made out of is unknown, but it is a very soft fiber that in many ways resembles a high-quality merino wool blend, though one that retains heat even more effectively than its natural counterpart. SCP-799's weight can vary from between half a kilogram all the way to 6 kilograms, and while examples have been found in nearly every color imaginable, it seems predisposed towards pastels and will frequently have patterns featuring stylized, friendly depictions of various animals. Both the pastel colors and the childish patterns are especially common in instances of SCP-799 that weigh less than 2 kilograms and would colloquially be known as baby blankets. While SCP-799 is undoubtedly a living organism, there is some debate as to whether it is itself an animal or perhaps a type of fungal colony. Instances of 799 are incapable of locomotion, lying motionless for long periods of time, and require little in the way of nutrition. What small amount they do need, they appear to be able to gain almost entirely from the organic particles present in normal household dust, such as animal dander and dead human skin cells. The blanket feeds via a series of minute, filter-feeding mouth-like structures that are spread across the surface of the creature, which wait for nutrients to fall into them, not unlike a sponge on the ocean floor. Instances of SCP-799 can survive for quite a while in this state, and one specimen was noted as having lived for multiple years in a damp attic, subsisting entirely on the small organic particles that would drift down from the rafters above. Should an instance of SCP-799 be forced to go for long periods of time without a source of nutrition, though, like when, for example, it is placed inside of a sealed closet or drawer, it will begin to undergo certain physical changes, which result in it metamorphosing into its predatory form. These changes aren't noticeable from only casual observation and consist of the blanket converting its many filter-feeding mouths into a single, large one that is lined with multiple rows of extremely sharp teeth. The blanket creature also develops a new form of tissue inside its cloth-like structure, one that is similar to muscle and capable of contracting and squeezing. Once its metamorphosis is complete, the instance of SCP-799 will lie in wait for an unsuspecting creature to cover themselves with it or wrap it around their body. Once they do, the blanket will bide its time until they enter a state of rest, usually waiting for them to fall asleep entirely, at which point its feeding phase will begin. Once the creature has detected that its victim is dormant, it will use its newly formed muscle to latch onto them, holding them in place as it opens its tooth-lined maw. It will begin to bite at its confined prey, tearing off several kilograms of flesh, bone, and any other organic material it can, swallowing it, and converting it into a thin slurry that it spreads through its body almost immediately. This traumatic, violent process nearly always leads to the victim dying of blood loss. Within 10 minutes of the attack, the mouth on SCP-799 will have been completely reabsorbed, leaving no signs that it is anything other than a normal, everyday blanket, though one which now mysteriously weighs several kilograms more than it did before. By 40 minutes after the attack, the entire digestive system within SCP-799 will have demetamorphosed back into its original form, with a single digestive tract being changed once again to the many dispersed filter-feeding mouths. While SCP-799 is more than happy to feed on any warm-blooded animal, including humans, it shows no interest in cold-blooded ones or inanimate objects. It appears then that its senses may be limited to only touch and heat, using those as signs that it is now wrapped around a potential meal. Adding to the strangeness of SCP-799 is that it reproduces through budding, like flatworms and corals. When it has absorbed enough nutrients and sufficiently increased its mass, either very slowly through filter feeding or rapidly via its carnivorous phase, it will begin to take on a quilt-like appearance. Over several weeks, one of the quilt squares will puff up and slide off the blanket. This new, smaller instance will resemble a doily or a throw pillow, until it too begins to feed and grow. The new instance is a perfect clone of its parent, identical in every way, and it will eventually grow to a similar size and begin its own reproductive cycle. It is unknown exactly how long it takes SCP-799 to reach full maturity, but the current best guess is that when kept in its filter-feeding phase, an instance will reproduce every 50 to 60 years. Instances of SCP-799 are quite prevalent across the planet, and the SCP Foundation currently has hundreds of examples in containment. Unfortunately, it is unknown just how many still exist in the wild, as it is very difficult to identify instances, with one of the only reliable means being through genetic testing. Should any instances be located, though, they are to be destroyed immediately, as the Foundation already has a large enough population in containment for research purposes, and they pose too much of a risk both in terms of harm and exposure to the general public. SCP-799 has been classified as Euclid, and each instance is kept in its own separate biocontainment cell at Biosite 66. Dust is regularly collected from the on-site D-Class personnel dorms and is sprinkled over the blankets regularly to keep them in their filter-feeding state, though only just enough to hopefully maintain their size and not allow them to reproduce. Should any small cloth objects appear in their containment lockers, it is to be removed immediately and contained separately. SCP-799 isn't the only predatory creature that resembles a cloth good in Foundation containment. and research into possible connections to SCP-1626, the oversized gray hooded sweatshirt that sends penetrating fibers into anyone unlucky enough to put it on, is ongoing.
A prisoner in a striped uniform is led down the central corridor of a penitentiary by a pair of guards. Wherever he's being taken, the prisoner is not going peacefully. The other inmates stand at their cell doors watching as he is dragged past them. The prisoner is begging for the guards to show him mercy, pleading for them not to make him go in there, to subject him to anything in the world, but that. The guards pay no attention to his cries as they force him along. They reach the end of the corridor and stop in front of the last cell, number 667. The prisoner looks into the dark, empty cell and screams, struggling against his captors one last time before they overpower him and shove him inside, slamming the door shut behind him. The prisoner looks around the small, dim cell. All that's inside is a bed with a thin mattress and a filthy toilet. He looks extremely scared, his eyes searching around the cell as if a monster is going to leap out from a dark corner and grab him. The prisoner hears a cracking sound and jumps in fright, spinning around to see a different kind of monster. Standing between the two guards who led him here is a third prison guard. He's enormous, and the prisoner watches as he cracks the knuckles of his massive hands. The giant guard reaches for something hanging next to the cell door. It's a clipboard. He looks at the prisoner's uniform and notes his name before writing it down. The large guard asks over his shoulder, "So, what are we thinking? 1 day? 2? For this one?" One of the other guards answers. "He deserves a lot more than that for what he did." "Why, what'd he do?" asks the big one. "He attacked one of the nurses. She's in pretty bad shape." One of the nurses? The veins in the larger guard's head start to bulge out as his grip on the pencil tightens. "Who was it?" It was Gloria," the guard answers. The pencil snaps in the giant guard's hand. One of the guards quickly picks it up and hands it back to him. Through gritted teeth, he answers, "I see." As the giant guard stares at him with angry, violent eyes, the prisoner starts to slink back into the dark cell, terrified of what's going to happen to him. "You like to attack nurses, do you? Well, we're gonna give you plenty of time to think about that. I'll see you in a year." The two other guards look at each other, clearly thinking that this is extreme even for a crime like this. "You sure that's a good idea?" one of them asks. But it's already too late. The guard has penciled in the date for exactly 1 year later. "No, please, no!" the prisoner screams, rushing towards the bars and reaching out as if it will somehow help him. But it doesn't. There's a faint rustling of wind that seems to carry the sound of whispers, and then the prisoner vanishes. He's simply gone, blinked out of existence. The guard hangs the clipboard back on the wall before turning and quickly walking away. He needs to get to the infirmary. The two guards can do nothing but shrug at each other and follow after him. "Poor guy," one of them whispers as they walk away from the empty cell. 1 year to the day later, the huge guard walks down the same prison corridor. It's late at night, and as he walks along, he lets his baton hit against the bars of the cells, making a loud clatter. "Wake up, everyone, wake up. It's a homecoming day." Sleepy prisoners get up out of their beds and stand at the front of their cells, trying their best to look through the bars to see the cell at the end of the block. "See what happens when you mess with staff? Come on, get up, today's the day. It's a homecoming." The guard gets to the end of the corridor and stops in front of the empty cell with the clipboard hanging on the wall next to it. The door is open, and there's nothing inside the dark cell except for the same dirty toilet and bed. The guard takes out his pocket watch and checks the time. Everyone, the guard and the prisoners alike, are all focused on the empty cell. The guard checks his watch again. The minute hand ticks over to midnight, and the moment it does, the cell door slides shut and locks with a loud click. The prison is completely silent, each inmate waiting with bated breath to see what happens next. The guard takes out a large, heavy ring of keys and inserts one into the cell door before stepping inside. He looks around, and still it appears that nothing inside is different. But then he spots what he's looking for. There in the corner, near the toilet, is a huddled figure in a striped prison uniform. Well, there you are." The guard starts to walk towards this person who has somehow appeared in the cell, but the huddled figure doesn't move or react in any way. The guard reaches down and puts a hand on the man to flip him over. "How'd you enjoy your stay?"
Solitary confinement is one of the most brutal forms of punishment that is still in use across much of the world today. The psychological and physical distress that comes from days, weeks, months, even sometimes years spent alone can be devastating. But as horrible as this practice is, there exists a form of retribution that is even more terrifying. One that even the most hardened of criminals fear and would do anything to avoid. This is SCP-2701, also known as True Solitary. SCP-2701 is a seemingly standard-looking prison cell located in a now-condemned Pennsylvania State Penitentiary. The prison, which was built in the early mid-1800s, was showing its age long before it was finally shut down, and the cell contains only an old toilet and bed, with a clipboard hanging to the left of the cell with various forms marked as intake. The cell's construction materials appear normal, and the contents themselves are non-anomalous. It is only when someone is placed inside of SCP-2701 and the clipboard next to the cell is used that its frightening effects become evident. When a human being is locked within the cell, their name is written on the intake form and a date is filled in under the Release Date section. SCP-2701's anomalous activation event is put in motion. 13 seconds after these conditions have been met, the person inside will disappear, completely vanishing from view as if they simply no longer exist. Any attempts to better understand the process by which they dematerialize have been unsuccessful, as all recording equipment looking into or placed inside the cell will show only static or blank images during the 13 seconds before the subject disappears. Researchers observing the effect in person, though, have reported the sounds of wind and unidentified whispering voices, but it is still unknown what may be producing these. At 12:00 a.m. on the dot on the release date, the cell's door will somehow close and lock itself if it is not already shut. At this exact moment, the person who vanished will reappear within the locked cell. Unfortunately for the person who was locked inside, while they may have returned to our reality, it is unlikely that they will ever be the same. Experiments into SCP-2701 have revealed that those who are placed inside and vanish will experience a state of complete sensory deprivation while remaining fully conscious the entire time. They experience no sounds, smells, or sense of touching anything. They do not even see darkness, since that would imply sight. Instead, they truly experience no senses at all. This effect can be disastrous for the human psyche, with subjects reporting that they have developed intense fears of both shadows and light, claustrophobia, agoraphobia, and a fear of going to sleep following their time within SCP-2701. At the same time, they will have experienced no physical changes at all, including aging, no matter how much time has passed. But the worst part of SCP-2701 is that those who are locked inside do not experience time at the same rate as you or I. No, tests have revealed that once someone disappears from within the cell, they will feel as if time has been significantly stretched out, with the dilation effect causing them to perceive time at a rate that has been estimated to be between 300 and 400 times longer than normal. That means that someone placed inside for 2 hours will experience time as if they had been locked away for 25 to 33 days, while someone placed inside for a whole year will feel as though they have been floating in a void of nothingness for several centuries. Foundation researchers have theorized that the absence of any outside stimulation for that long of a period causes the mind to break down rational thought structures in an effort to mitigate stress, and that a complete psychological breakdown soon follows. In order to better understand the effects of SCP-2701, the SCP Foundation embarked on a number of tests using Class D personnel. In one experiment, which was performed on a D class known as D77391, the event started at 11:45 p.m., and the release date was set for the coming midnight. This led to the D class being inside the cell for 15 minutes, though they experienced their time within as having lasted 75 to 100 hours. When D77391 was interviewed 6 hours after reappearing, they described their time inside as being a true hell. Experiencing nothing but emptiness, they couldn't do anything. They couldn't sleep, they couldn't even scream. They were left alone with only their thoughts and memories. The only thing that kept them from completely losing their mind was something one of the researchers told them before they entered the cell. The researcher told them that no matter what they felt, that they had to hold on to the idea that they were going to come back. They needed to remember they wouldn't be in there forever. While these words of encouragement did seem to stave off the worst of the mental effects D77391 could have suffered, they also impacted the results of the experiment, and the offending researcher was later reassigned to a different project following a 6-month suspension. The SCP Foundation first became aware of SCP-2701 following reports of certain abnormalities at a Pennsylvania state penitentiary. There were numerous complaints by lawyers that they were not being allowed to meet with their clients and that they were being denied access to the site by the prison's warden. When police were finally dispatched to the site to investigate, it was discovered that the entire prison, which previously housed 137 inmates and employed a number of staff, had only one inhabitant: the warden. He described the activation procedure for Cell 667 and explained that he had placed every single prisoner inside one by one and made them disappear. He had been keeping the funds that were supposed to be used for the care of the inmates, as well as to bribe officials and former staff in order to keep the warden's scheme secret and prevent any official inquiries. The warden surrendered to the police without incident, and an undercover Foundation agent within the Philadelphia police soon alerted SCP agents to the cell's anomalous effects. When a Foundation team arrived on site, they found the cell exactly as described, along with the intake forms. The prison warden had been telling the truth. Over 100 forms were filled out with inmates' names, with release dates ranging from 50 to over 1,300 years in the future. The ease with which SCP-2701 is able to be contained has led to it receiving the Safe classification. The former prison where SCP-2701 is located is monitored at all times by video and audio surveillance, and a security guard equipped with full-body restraints is present at all times to both detain any subjects who appear within the cell, as well as prevent any new ones from being placed inside that aren't a part of an official SCP Foundation experiment. 3 SCP Foundation agents stand before a large warehouse. Their mission is simple: enter the building, find the observation unit that has gone missing inside, recover the data from it, and leave. It should be easy, but the rundown structure they're standing in front of is no ordinary building. This is SCP-015. The leader of the group, a large, muscled man who goes by the codename of Agent 6, slides open a large door on the front of the warehouse, and immediately the whole group is struck by a sight that makes them reconsider just how easy this mission is going to be. In front of them is not a wide-open warehouse floor, but a cramped tunnel leading deeper into the building. The group has a job to do, though, and so the 3 head inside, Agent 2 first, followed by Agent Lon, the data specialist, and finally, Agent 6, the expedition leader in the rear. As they enter the narrow hall of pipes, the light from their flashlights plays off the floor, walls, and ceiling. Flashlights are one of the only items allowed in SCP-015, and they reveal what the researchers had told them in their briefing, that many of the pipes aren't made of standard materials, but instead are all sorts of strange substances like wood, glass, or even bone. The odd series of pipes have formed a twisting tunnel leading deeper into the warehouse. The group must be careful, since the floor is uneven, with pipes occasionally sticking up out of the floor like tree roots, ready to trip the unobservant. The 3 follow the corridors of pipes along the path that they each had to memorize. As they come to branching paths, Agent 2 speaks the series of turns they must take aloud. Left, left, right, left, right, right again, straight, right. And so on as they go deeper and deeper. They'd have to follow the directions exactly if they hope to reach the place where the modular robotic vehicle should be. Left, straight, straight again, right. Just a couple more turns and they'd reach the point where the MRV had sent its last signal before going offline. As they walk, though, they find that some of the passageways are getting more difficult to pass. The pipes have closed in at certain points, choking the already small tunnels down to mere crawlways. At one particularly narrow point, the group must get down on their bellies and pull themselves along the ground. After Lon and 2 exit the tight passage, Agent 6 suddenly calls out to the 2 agents ahead of him. "What is it? What's wrong?" 2 asks. "I'm stuck," comes the response from 6. Lon and 2 grab 6's arms and begin pulling. With a loud grunt from all of them, 6 finally comes free. His pant leg is shredded from the thorny wood that one of the pipes in the narrow tunnel is made from, but he's free, and they can continue on. Finally, after what seemed like an hour of walking, they finally find it. The modular robotic vehicle that had been sent in to investigate the current state of SCP-015. There's something very strange about the robot's condition, though. It looks like it has been speared right through its primary observation unit. A smooth black pipe that appeared to be made of dark fabric had pierced the vehicle right through its camera, but the lens didn't appear broken. Instead, it looked as if the pipe had somehow connected with it, docking inside the lens housing as if the two parts were made for each other. Other pipes had protruded from the floors and walls as well, snaking into open spots on the vehicle and lifting it up a foot off the ground. They looked over the robot, which was held helpless in the air, its wheels slowly spinning as its internal battery ran down. The agents walked around the MRV, examining it, looking confused about the fate that had befallen it. Six suddenly broke the silence. "Well, what are you waiting for?" Lon wasn't sure what to do, though. As she got closer to the robot, she noticed that a foul-smelling substance was dripping from the pipe that had merged with the camera. Her job was to remove the data from the MRV, but they also had strict orders not to damage anything in SCP-015. So what was she to do about the robot? Wasn't it technically a part of SCP-015 now? She was worried that if she removed the data cards, then SCP-015 might... Well, she didn't know exactly. Six didn't buy it, though. The researchers may have told them that 015 reacts, but he could see now that it's just a bunch of weird pipes. Maybe it grows or moves a bit, but how would it even know they were there? It hadn't shown any signs of sentience, let alone sapience. He wasn't going to hang around in here any longer than he had to, though, and if Lon wouldn't get on with it, then he would. Six moves to the MRV and flips open the data cover on its side. More of the fetid liquid pours out, but he ignores it. Lon and Two both look at each other. Did the other hear that too? It sounded like steam venting from somewhere deep inside SCP-015. Six doesn't seem to have heard it, and begins to remove the thin data cards from the MRV. With the data now recovered, he decides to see if he could free the vehicle from the pipes. It wasn't necessarily a mission objective, but why let good Foundation property go to waste when it's right here in front of them? Six pulls first at the MRV, then the pipes that were running into it, but he can't get it to move. It's completely stuck, seemingly fused to the pipes. "Come on, we've got the data, let's get out of here," Two says. But Six isn't done trying. He sets his flashlight down and uses both hands, pushing against the wall of pipes with his foot to gain additional leverage, when suddenly, there's a creaking sound. "Ha! I think I got it." But Six was mistaken. It wasn't the sound of the MRV coming free that he had heard, but the sound of the floor underneath him giving way. Six falls into the floor up to his armpits, and the other two agents rush to help him. But as they do, they notice the glow and immediate burst of heat coming from the hole. Thickly flowing molten glass begins to fill the hole, and Agent Six cries for help as they desperately try to pull him free. His cries turn into screams of desperation as they each grab an arm and, after a struggle, finally manage to free him and drag him from the hole. Six is no longer screaming as he is pulled free, though. His eyes and mouth are locked wide in sheer panic. Lon is now the one who starts to scream, as she realizes that they have pulled only the top half of Agent Six from the hole above the fiery pit. The bottom half of his body is completely gone, burned away by the heat of the liquid glass. There's no time to be shocked, though, because pipes begin to hiss and ping all around them. A wooden pipe above Two and Lon suddenly bursts, sending a cloud of dust flying into their faces. It's powdered glass, and it starts to pour out of the broken pipe, covering what's left of Six completely. Two spits out a thick stream of blood, his mouth shredded from the glass particles, as Lon desperately tries not to rub them deeper into the cuts in her eyes. They both know they can't stay here, though. They have to run. The pipes are deafening as they move as quickly as they can back the way they came. It sounds like a train is barreling through the building. They're surrounded by chaos. Boiling chemicals pour out of one pipe. Tiny slicing rose thorns spray out of another. They come to a crawlway that's just a couple feet wide, but it's their only way forward, and they have no choice but to enter. Two dives in and starts crawling. Lon is hesitant, but a blast of steam from a pipe near her head convinces her she has no choice, and she follows after him. Two wriggles through the narrow passage and is surrounded by more sounds of pipes creaking all around him. Each one seems like it might burst and pour who knows what deadly substance onto him. But he has to suppress his fear and keep moving forward. Finally, he emerges into a wider hallway. He turns and looks back at the hole. Lon should have been right behind him, but there's no sign of her. He sticks his head back in and calls for her. There's no response, but he can hear her still in there, somewhere in the dark, struggling. He has to help her. Two gets back into the passage and starts crawling. She couldn't have been that far behind him, probably just around the next turn. But as he crawls around the bend, there's nothing there, just another wall of pipes. The passage has been sealed up. It's a dead end. He presses his ear to the wall and can hear Lon screaming on the other side. He hits his flashlight against the pipes in anger. The pipe shakes for a moment, then bursts, spraying out a black liquid that covers his hand. It's some kind of corrosive acid, and he screams as it burns through his gloves to the flesh beneath. He quickly crawls backwards out of the narrow tunnel and emerges back out into the wider passage. Chu cradles his hand, trying not to look at the exposed bone. "I'm sorry," he cries as he runs through the tunnel of pipes towards what he hopes is the exit. "I'll get help. I'll come back, I swear." Lon can't hear his promises, though. She heard what she thought was a pipe burst followed by Chu's cries, but she doesn't know now if he's dead or alive. She decides she has no choice but to go back the way she came. Maybe there's another way out. But after moving just a few inches, her feet touch a solid wall. She's trapped in a space no bigger than a coffin. She feels around, but there's nothing here in the dark. Nothing at all. Just smooth, fuzzy, warm pipes. No, wait. There is something. A gap in the ceiling. But it's just the open end of another pipe. And now, there's something dripping out of it. Droplets of whatever the substance is land on her face, and then a full stream of liquid pours out onto her. She coughs as it gets into her mouth, but then realizes that it's sweet. It's honey? At least it wasn't molten glass or deadly acid. Maybe she could even survive for a time on the liquid until another expedition team came to rescue her. Her brief moment of hope is cut short when she realizes that the pipe isn't stopping, and that she's already lying in an inch-deep pool of honey. Lon beats on the walls and ceiling as the honey continues to rise around her and screams for help. She tries to plug the pipe with her fingers, but it's no use. Nothing can stop more and more of it from pouring out. The honey continues to rise around her, and all she can do is scream and claw at the pipes that have created her tomb. She presses her lips to the ceiling in an attempt to gain one last breath before the honey completely fills the space. Her final choking gasps are sickly and sweet as the honey fills her lungs. Agent 2 keeps running through the tunnel of pipes. His hand no longer hurts, at least, either from the shock or from the fact that all the nerve endings had been burned away. The horrible sounds coming from the pipes seem to have stopped too. Maybe he really would make it out of this alive. Lon might have found another way out too. There's no telling how many routes through this maze of pipes exist. He would probably exit the building to find her outside waiting for him. Poor Agent 6, though. He never had a chance after opening that cover on the MRV. His thoughts are abruptly interrupted, though, when his foot catches on an unseen pipe and he falls forward onto the floor. Or rather, he should have fallen on the floor. Instead, a pit opens up in the ground, leading to a steep, sloping floor of pipes. He screams and tries to stop himself, but the slick liquid covering everything makes it impossible for him to slow his descent, and he begins to slide down the pipes. His dimming flashlight shows what seemed to be an endless tunnel of pipes stretching down into the dark. The tube of pipes twisted this way and that, slamming him into the walls on either side, tumbling him head over feet. And the descent never seemed to end. He screamed until his voice went hoarse, then gave out entirely. He didn't have any way to mark the passage of time, other than when his flashlight finally started to flicker and then dim, before finally dying. He slid down the endless tunnel of pipes for what felt like days in the darkness, far deeper than they physically should have been able to go. When the friction of the pipes began to tear his skin away, it was almost welcome. At least there would finally be an end. Following the loss of the SCP-015 recovery team, the data on the modular robotic vehicle was deemed non-vital, and no further expeditions were authorized in order to try and recover it. SCP-015 is a mass of pipes, vents, boilers, and other various plumbing apparatuses that have completely filled an otherwise nondescript warehouse located in a major American city. Anytime the warehouse is not being directly observed, the pipes will begin to grow, filling nearly all of the available space in the building, but also trying to connect to other nearby structures through the sewer and other subterranean infrastructure systems. The current best estimate of Foundation researchers is that the building contains over 190 kilometers of pipes, which range from just 2.5 centimeters to over 1 meter in diameter. While some of these pipes will look new, others have the appearance of being rusted or damaged, with many showing signs of leaking. The pipes are made of a strange assortment of materials as well, including bone, wood, steel, pressed ash, human flesh, glass, and granite. Oddly, no pipes composed of lead, PVC plastic, copper, or any other material one would normally expect to be used for the production of pipes have been found. But by far the strangest anomalous quality of SCP-015 is that it appears to react to aggressors. Should the building detect that the personnel inside of it are carrying tools, or if they make any attempt to either damage or repair any of its pipes, they will trigger an immediate reaction. pipes near the offending subject will often burst, spraying them with a variety of liquids that have included oil, mercury, rats, a species of insect not yet identified, ground glass, seawater, entrails, and molten iron. More and more pipes will continue to burst around the subject until they either retreat from SCP-015 or are killed. SCP-015 was discovered by the Foundation after reports that pipes emanating from a warehouse had mysteriously started to connect to multiple other nearby structures, with no obvious answer for how or why they had suddenly begun emerging from the structure. The pipes were eventually able to be cut back and are now solely within the warehouse once again, but the human cost of containing SCP-015 has been high, and so far, 11 SCP personnel have been killed in their interactions with the anomaly, and an additional 20 are still missing. All of the missing are presumed to also be dead, though there have been reports of banging and screaming coming from within the building that may indicate they are still alive in some form. SCP-015 has been classified as Euclid, and because the building itself is impossible to move, it has been effectively contained on site. The Foundation maintains a gap of at least 2 meters around the warehouse, and no structures are allowed to be built that make contact with the building's outer walls. Should any protrusions from SCP-015 be detected, the pipes are to be immediately capped and sealed. Internal exploration of SCP-015 is permitted with approval from senior staff, but following numerous losses within the site, expedition teams must consist of 3 members, all of whom are equipped with safety lines and GPS tracking. The teams are not allowed to bring any hand or power tools within the building, nor are they to attempt any repairs or maintenance of any kind while inside. There's no need to enforce these rules, though, seeing as SCP-015 appears more than happy to terminate the offenders itself. The SCP Foundation contains many anomalous locations, though SCP-015 may just be one of the strangest.
July 18, 2014. The calm and peaceful tranquility of the day has just been disrupted by the squawk of a panicked report over the radio. Civilians in danger. Urgent assistance required. The park ranger hears the screams carried through the trees by the wind a second later, already hurtling his way toward the location given by his colleague. Something is very, very wrong. Usually nothing like this happens at Crater Lake National Park. His mind starts racing as fast as the Jeep he's driving, a brain entering survival mode, trying to predict every possible danger. A forest fire? It was still daylight. He'd have seen the smoke. An animal attack? Maybe. Bears could sometimes be seen roaming about on the fringes of the park, but they typically kept away from humans, especially the more people were around. And today, in the midst of July, there were plenty to ward off any strays. Every attempted prediction only raised the same question. Just what the hell was going on? Approaching the tree line, one of the other rangers waves down the car. She's armed. If the vagueness of the report hadn't been troubling enough, seeing another park ranger with a shotgun in her hands certainly was. They were in bear territory. It wasn't unheard of for one of them to occasionally need a gun to ward the bears off, but that was a rarity out at Crater Lake. Slamming the brakes and leaping out of the Jeep, the park ranger rushes towards his colleague as she takes cover behind a nearby tree. He immediately asks her what the situation is, but she urges him to be quiet. There's something out there with them, she tells him in a whisper, racking a live round into her shotgun. When the park ranger asks what, the other ranger shoots him a look. Her eyes say it all. She's terrified and confused. This isn't just a wild animal on a rampage or frightenedly defending its territory and cubs. She has no idea what it is. She can't even believe she's seen it, let alone start describing it. Twigs snap under the foot of something, causing the other ranger to raise her shotgun, leaning out from behind the tree in the direction of the noise. She scans the space a few feet beyond the barrel. Nothing. The park ranger takes a look for himself, not exactly eager to see what it is, but unable to fend off his own curiosity. He spots something, nothing more than a shape passing between the trees, almost mistaking it for a branch simply moving in the gentle breeze. He taps on the other ranger's shoulder and alerts her. Whatever it is, it's close, and it seems to be walking like a man. The other ranger looks. In a second, she raises her shotgun and fires. A blast of buckshot erupts from the barrel, causing a deafening, high-pitched ringing in the park ranger's ears. He doubles over, clutching his ears as the sound becomes physically painful, not realizing his colleague fumbling as she grabs a fresh cartridge, or the thing staggering towards them. That is, until he looks up, the moment his hearing returns. But before we go any further, I have a question for you. Does something feel wrong with you? Is something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? Regardless if you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or if you're just a human who lives in this world who's going through a hard time, therapy can give you tools to approach your life in a very different way. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and more accessible, and this is an important mission because finding a therapist can be really hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online. It's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. There's a link in my description. It's betterhelp.com/DrBob. Clicking that link helps support this channel, but it also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp, so you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. And because finding a therapist is a little like dating, if you don't really fit with that therapist, which is a common thing with therapy, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost, without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/DrBob. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. Now back to the bizarre creature in the forest. It's like part of the forest has come to life and assumed the shape of a human being in order to attack them. Roots cover its body, sealing up the space where its eyes would be. Oregon-beaked moss coats its arms and hangs off it like it's been draped in a sheet of yellowy-green plants. The creature is horrible to look at, and yet it looks lost. It stumbles, arms outstretched like it's trying to blindly feel its way around, and the park ranger realizes it can't see. Another cartridge clicks into the shotgun tube, pulled back the chamber by the slide of the pump, and the other ranger raises the weapon, steadying her aim so as not to miss this time. Her sights line up, the mossy monstrosity sitting in the center, and her fingers squeezes on the trigger. An unexpected force from below pushes the barrel of the shotgun upwards, pointing it towards the treetops. Another ear-splitting blast rings out, sending nearby birds flying from their nests in panic. The park ranger keeps the weapon pointed up, despite his colleagues' protests to let go of her gun, or the drops of blood dripping out and trailing down his neck from his own eardrums. He glances over his shoulder as, whatever it is, flees in terror. Startled by the shotgun blast, it runs away between the trees, knocking into some as it moves with uncertainty. Minutes later, a team of other rangers arrives, declaring that they're taking over the search effort for the creature that was found lurking around Crater Lake National Park. These rangers seem off. They look the part, in full uniforms and everything, but the park ranger can't place their faces. They somehow seem brand new, yet not one of them is fazed by the unusual situation. They seemed all the more interested in questioning all the hikers and families visiting the park who had seen the creature, as they were in actually finding it. It was almost as if they didn't want the word getting out. The park ranger decides he can't keep quiet any longer and raises a concern to the newcomers. He tells them that he doesn't think whatever is out there is some kind of monster. He thinks it's human. The new rangers thank him for his input, but insist that they'll take it from here. Little did he know, these weren't other park rangers. They were agents of the SCP Foundation. They have been embedded within the National Park's Rangers to contain SCP-3310, an anomalous log floating in Crater Lake, said to contain a powerful deity named Yule, who can cause dangerous weather to erupt unless the log is left to float freely. Then the call comes in from SCP Foundation Command, reports of an entity attacking civilians. Since they happen to be nearby, in the same park no less, a handful of agents are sent in to investigate and, if possible, contain the creature. Before too long, the civilian witnesses, even the real park rangers who had tried to kill the entity, have all been interviewed, administered with memory-wiping amnestics, and subsequently released, as if nothing out of the ordinary has even happened. Putting boots to the ground, the search for the unidentified creature doesn't last long. Within 2 hours, the agents have found what they're looking for. Only, it's not a creature. It's a person. His name is Zach Herman. They find him cowering under an alcove near the edge of the lake, his moss-covered skin providing a near-perfect camouflage for him to blend in with his woodland surroundings. The only thing that gives him away is the sound of his frightened sobs. The Foundation agents aren't under orders to neutralize him on sight. Instead, they humanely subdue Zach Herman and arrange to have him taken to a nearby Foundation outpost for examination. SCP-3462, an anomalous humanoid entity known to inhabit a rundown Blockbuster video rental store in the nearby town of Bend, Oregon, with the area having been sealed off and constantly patrolled by Foundation personnel. So that seems like the best place to take Zach and figure out exactly what happened to him. Upon closer examination at the Foundation outpost, it's discovered that Zach Herman has a number of unidentified roots growing through both his skin and internal organs. Given the danger to his life that this poses, he's rushed into an operating theater to undergo emergency surgery. 18 hours pass as the Foundation tries to save the man's life. At this time, the surgeons decide that it isn't wise or possible to remove all the roots at once, so instead, they focus on clearing the ones that had grown within and over his eyes, nostrils, ear canals, and throat. Another 7 hours of intensive surgery pass, and Zach Herman is still alive. He's not cured, but the roots covering much of his face have at least been cleared. After stabilizing, it's then that he's transferred to Site 56, where the Foundation intends to conduct further operations to remove the growths from his body, as well as ask Zach questions about what happened to him. They're still baffled as to what caused his anomalous mutation into a moss monster. Just where had these roots come from? And what exactly was SCP-7185? Researcher Charlie Canley is tasked with conducting interviews with the subject, Zach Herman, between his various procedures, and she wastes no time in unearthing his story. Oak Ridge, Oregon, 60 miles north of Crater Lake National Park, where Zach will eventually be found. That's where he describes the horrific mutation taking place. Given that the roots would grow over his eyes, his vision impaired, he has no idea where he's going until he eventually winds up in Crater Lake. Scared, alone, and changed beyond recognition. And as he describes it, he wasn't the only one. Shortly before his own mutation, Zach mentions witnessing the same happening to Kellen Herman, his husband. The couple, along with a group of several others, are in a small Oregon town reached by traveling to Hills Creek Lake, then following Hills Creek Road south until finding a road sign simply labeled Beard. The place has spent 70 years in ruins, abandoned, and left to be overtaken by the elements. Most of the roads leading into the area are blocked off thanks to a landslide, leaving the town completely void of all human life. Until Zach and his friends arrive in Beard. There are 6 of them in total, including Zach, his husband Kellen, then Azrael, Mark, Angel, and Caleb. Answering an ad on Craigslist, the group has come to Beard after being hired by a man named Sean to scavenge through the abandoned town, collecting anything that could potentially be of value. Scrap metal and intact valuables, as long as they can be resold, are worth holding on to. While the group searches, Sean delivers food and supplies to them once per month. One thing that they hope for each time, but never seem to get, is something to drink in their downtime. So on a whim, while exploring an abandoned factory they come across, Zach looks for an alternative source of beer for the group to enjoy. What he finds is an unusual blue machine. Pulling levers on it, he finds that it dispenses samples of a surprisingly green liquid. Of course, none of the group immediately drinks it. Not until Angel finds an old journal with entries dating back to the 1930s. It describes the owners of the factory giving the liquid to their workers and only ceasing the practice after the workers stopped getting drunk. Taking that to mean the liquid was safe to drink, the group decided to each take a swig of the green. Initially, none of them feel any change. It's actually rather anticlimactic, at least at first. Soon after, however, they start to feel energized, more alert, and awake for much longer without feeling the usually expected fatigue that would bring. It even helps them search through parts of the town quicker, something they're all grateful for. After a week, not one of them even feels the need to sleep. They were even healing from injuries faster, small cuts were sealing in minutes, bruises clearing entirely almost as quickly as they formed. After about a month, the negative side effects start. They start manifesting as small symptoms, the group experiencing various bodily aches that gradually become far, far worse. It affects each of them differently, too. Zach starts to experience a tightness in his chest, while Caleb develops a bad fever that leaves him barely able to function. Mark and Angel's hair starts falling out in thick clumps, too. Soon after, the same is happening to Caleb. His symptoms are the first to worsen. After his hair falls out, his skin starts to do the same. It keeps peeling away, turning red. Then, Sean arrives in Beard. According to the information given by Zach in his interviews with the Foundation, their employer would routinely drive to the town every 3 months in order to pick up anything valuable the group has recovered. All of them suffering from the ill effects of whatever the liquid they'd all drank was. Those of the group that still had the strength to stand rushed to meet Sean and beg him to get them help. Upon taking one look at them, he drives away, abandoning them. 4 days after Sean left them there, the sleepless group is startled by screaming in the night. It's Caleb, and he's on fire. Panicking, the others try to help, pouring water on him to douse the flames. It seems to work, but it's only a few minutes before the fire starts up again. They even try taking him to the creek that runs through the town, but submerging Caleb in the water only causes his skin to form massive blisters that painfully burst. Keeping him under didn't work either. He kept needing to come up for air, and breaking the surface, he started catching fire again the second he was above water. There was nothing they could do to save him. He just kept burning. Caleb is the first of the group to die. It's not clear when this occurred. Investigating the area, the Foundation recovers fragmented journal entries written by Azrael, in which the others all attribute Caleb's death to him having a weak immune system. But normally, diseases don't cause people to spontaneously catch fire. By the morning, he is almost completely burned, leaving only a charred corpse that the group buries by the factory. Following Caleb's death, Zach is forced to leave. The others blame him for Caleb's death, and he does as well. He intends to find some other way of getting help for the rest of the group. Kellen joins him, and the couple leave Beard together. Meanwhile, Angel, Mark, and Azrael search for their own way out of the town, but to no avail. Hardly any of the roads are accessible on foot, and those that are just lead to abandoned properties on the woodland outskirts of Beard. According to Azrael's journal entry, they then refocused their efforts towards finding a cure for whatever it was they had drunk. It's not much more successful. During Zach and Kellen's absence, Mark is the next group member whose symptoms start to get worse. His hair was almost entirely gone, and soon, rashes started to form over his skin before peeling away. Immediately, he and the other two start to fear that what happened to Caleb might be about to happen to Mark, too. Their only plan is for Mark to stay out in the snow if he starts catching fire in the same way, since, by this point, winter had reached Oregon. But instead of a reoccurrence of Caleb's condition, Mark's skin begins repeatedly forming an unusual bluish-green substance, warm to the touch. It accumulates every few hours, and Angel and Azrael help him scrape it off before it ultimately returns. Within days, it's returning faster, too fast for them to clear it. So much of it forms that it starts dripping off Mark. Then Angel points out it seems to be candle wax, and the more of it, the hotter it gets. Shortly after, the substance burns out Mark's eyes. He's completely covered in scalding hot wax, with no way of removing it entirely. Eventually, he dies. Angel and Azrael can't move his body thanks to the wax, as more of it keeps forming, nor can they bury him yet thanks to a snowstorm outside. It's only a week later that Azrael thinks he sees the body moving. Mark is still alive. He's been lying in a pile of hot wax the entire time, his body still making more. Soon, he stops moving altogether. While all this is happening, Kellen and Zach are still trying to find help, but manage to wind up lost in the woods surrounding Beard. The numerous overlapping and confusing paths surrounding the town had meant one wrong turn sends both of them heading towards the woods, with only a few cans of food, a lighter, and a pocket knife between them. After a week, they pass a mountain that Zach assumes is the Diamond Peak volcano. Another week later, both he and Kellen are beginning to suffer their own severe symptoms from the liquid they consumed. Kellen is vomiting shards of metal and glass. Further metallic chunks were breaking through Kellen's skin as they grew within his body. At the same time, roots grow over Zach's eyes, preventing him from fully seeing just what is happening to his husband. They sit together in Kellen's dying moments, Zach feeling like he needs to be there for his partner, even though he can't see him or do anything to help him. A few hours after Kellen's breathing eventually stops, Zach walks through the woods until he hears the sound of cars, only to be found in Crater Lake National Park. Around the same time, Angel also dies. It takes him a whole week after his eyelids and fingernails fall out, followed by every layer of his skin. It would happen multiple times, thanks to the effects of the green liquid causing him to recover. Also, his skin could once again come off. At one point, Azrael, horrified by it all, sees his friend's face fall off. Still unable to find a way out of Beard, one of the remaining 2 survivors of the group also starts to change. Bumps form under Azrael's skin, eventually causing his hands to become swollen and preventing him from moving anything below his chest. Aware of his impending fate, he stashes the journal he's been writing in inside a backpack and leaves it for whoever finds them. The Foundation is able to recover the bodies of Azrael, Angel, Mark, and the buried remains of Caleb within Beard, but they decline to share this information with Zach. Sean's identity is confirmed to be that of Sean McDougal, and Foundation agents are sent to interrogate him. They aren't able to ascertain any valuable information from him, so instead amnesticize him. Anything saved on Sean's devices relating to the location of the town of Beard, the group he hired to scavenge there, and the $46,000 he'd made from the scavenged goods are all seized. SCP-7185 consists of 2 elements. The first is an unidentified machine that was uncovered by Zach Herman and his friends in an abandoned factory in the southern Cascadian mountain range of Oregon. Despite not having any power sources connected to it, SCP-7185 seemingly functions without the need for electricity. It is instead operated via a series of levers connected to the main body of the device. 2 are black and 1 is rusted over. Should both of the black levers be switched downwards and the rusty lever pulled, the machine will produce the second element of this anomaly, designated by the Foundation as SCP-7185-1, hereby alternatively known as the body horror juice. The alcoholic liquid byproduct of activating SCP-7185 is green in color and has a semi-viscous consistency. If this liquid is drunk at any point by a human being, then this person will undergo major bodily changes that tend to span a period of at least several weeks. Anyone ingesting SCP-7185-1 will suffer numerous mutations and deformations of their body, although exactly how they are altered varies depending on the person drinking the juice. SCP-7185-1 also negates the effects of any depressants, opiates, or other stimulants taken after ingestion, meaning there is no way to nullify the pain of these intense physical changes. On July 21, 2014, Zach Herman died due to complications during surgery. The Foundation surgeons had been making extensive efforts to clear the roots growing throughout his body as a result of Herman ingesting SCP-7185. They had made enough of a difference to allow him to participate in interviews with researcher Canley. However, during these exchanges, Zach mentions that he can still feel everything that is happening to him during the procedures. Every incision, every removal, every stitch. The same day, the body of Zach's husband, Kellen Herman, is also recovered. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-420, Aggressive Skin Condition.